your full potential. And in unlimited power, you'll learn how to overcome your personal limitations, turn fear into power, and achieve whatever you want. Tony Robbins will show you how to model and duplicate excellence in any area of your life by using the principles of neuro-linguistic programming. NLP, as it's more commonly known, is the study of how people communicate to themselves. It outlines how language, both verbal and nonverbal, affects our nervous system and everything we do. By practicing NLP, you'll discover how to direct your own state of mind so you can produce the results you desire. In this audio cassette program, you'll be given the ultimate success formula. You'll learn a way to persuade and motivate others with amazing precision. You'll be taught a system for gaining instant rapport with anyone you meet. And with Tony Robbins as your guide, you'll learn techniques for putting yourself in a positive state of mind, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. Tony Robbins is known internationally for his personal excellence seminars and his training in neuro-linguistics. He has appeared on countless radio and television shows, including The Merv Griffin Show, The Today Show, and CBS News. He is founder and president of Robbins Research Institute, a company dedicated to the advancement of human potential. And his book, Unlimited Power, hit number 5 on the New York bestseller list. On this program, we've combined studio tapes with lively and exciting seminar recordings. And now, let's join Tony Robbins.
Success is not an accident. The difference between people who produce positive results and those who do not is not in some sort of random roll of the dice. There are consistent, logical patterns of action, specific pathways to excellence that are within the reach of us all. We can all unleash the magic within us. We simply must learn how to turn on and use our minds and bodies in the most powerful and advantageous ways. I want to share with you in this program some principles, a science for human change that I believe can make a major difference in the quality of your life. That belief comes from the fact that I've transformed the quality of my mind and my body by using these principles, by using these tools. And I'm very excited about being able to share them with you. I've constantly been looking for the answers to what the difference is in human beings. I've always been fascinated by why some people, in spite of all advantages in life, barely get by, and while others who have some of the greatest challenges a man could think of have turned those challenges into tremendous opportunities and are producing the quality of life that only a few people dream about. And I want to introduce you to basically the distillation of all that I've been able to learn about what creates human behavior and emotion, about how to run our mind and our bodies to produce outstanding results. In this tape, you're going to learn how to change any emotion you have literally in a few moments. You're going to learn how to take fears of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of the unknown, and turn them into positive anticipation, not just through positive thinking, but through positive programming, by literally reprogramming the way your mind and body respond to the stimulus of your environment. In this program, you're going to learn how to create instantaneous rapport with anyone you meet. I'm sure you've had times in your life when you've seen someone from across the room, and instantly you felt linked to them, you felt associated to them, you felt as if you knew them. Or you've had times when someone's come up to you and said, "Don't I know you?" and they were sincere. What we're going to show you is how you can create that consistently. What this tape program is about is how to produce new results in your life, how to produce new behaviors, new emotions, and how to do it consciously and consistently. This process is made available through a technology called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short. It is the cutting edge of human psychology. Neuro-linguistic programming stands for neuro, the nervous system, linguistics, meaning language, and programming, meaning a system for producing results. So in essence, what NLP is the study of how to use your language, both your verbal language and your nonverbal, your body, your face, your breathing, your tonality, to produce new results in your nervous system and thus in your life. I came across NLP basically out of desperation. After growing up in an environment of lack and looking around at people and looking for differences, I set out on my pursuit of excellence, on my study of human success. I began to read as many books as I could get on human development, on human psychology, on physiological development, and I applied everything that I could to make differences in my life. I wanted to make sure that when I grew up, I had an environment that would support my friends and my family and my children so that they felt excellent anytime they were in my presence, and so that I could have a positive effect on them and on my world. And I made a difference in my life. By the time I was 19 years old, I was quite quote-unquote successful. I had a large business. I was written up in newspapers and magazines as this young entrepreneur. My nickname was Wonder Boy. I was so proud of myself at the time. And I was doing very, very well in impacting people, and also I was doing well economically. At 19 years old, I was earning $5,000 to $10,000 a month in personal income. But eventually what happened as I began to succeed is I also began to get very uncomfortable. I began to find myself in a place where suddenly I began to sabotage my own success. And maybe you've done this at times in your life, when things got almost too good. It sounds absurd, and yet so many of us in the culture fall into the trap of feeling that we're not worthy, or feeling as if we're uncomfortable with things because new success is the unknown. Many times what people begin to do is sabotage their success to get back to their mental idea of what they think they deserve. They don't do it consciously, they do it unconsciously. And that's exactly what I did in my life. All of a sudden, I started not showing up for meetings. All of a sudden, I started treating people really harshly who didn't deserve to be treated that way. All of a sudden, I began to focus on survival and getting by and doing less instead of creating more value in the world. Well, it didn't take very long for my life to deteriorate. Within about 120 days, my company was just a name. I gained over 38 pounds. I was totally broke financially, emotionally, and spiritually. I'd wake up in the morning and my major goal had become, what was I going to eat that day? And I began to find myself sinking deeper and deeper into depression. Now, the biggest challenge with this, of course, is I'd read all the books. I'd been to all the seminars. I knew all the tools that should have allowed me to change my life, but I wasn't using them. I wasn't applying them. And finally, out of desperation, I made changes. And the way I made changes was I decided to totally commit myself to discovering what was the difference between me and people that were succeeding. I knew the information. That wasn't the answer. What was the one key difference between me and others? I wanted to know the one foundational key for all of success. So I began to search for answers. And the first answer, of course, I came up with was knowledge. That is that people who succeed must know things that people who don't succeed don't know. But very quickly I found out I knew as much as anyone did about succeeding. Then I thought, well, if it's not knowledge, it's education. And, I just had a high school education. Maybe that was a problem. And I realized that wasn't true either, because I had been succeeding without any kind of college education. I had been producing outstanding results, both economically, emotionally, personally, and physically. So I realized that wasn't it either. So I began to look at people that were succeeding. And I found a lot of people that were very educated who weren't successful. And I found a lot of people who didn't have a lot of talent, who didn't have a lot of ability, didn't have a lot of education, didn't even have a lot of skill, who were extremely successful. So I looked at this dichotomy to find out what was the difference in people. Really, what caused certain people to succeed in spite of limitation, while others with tremendous resources, like myself, were not following through. And I found what I think the number one foundational key to all success is, and I call it personal power. Personal power to me means the ability to take action. Action, that's what separates human beings. That's what makes the difference between the winners and the losers. We're all winners, but some of us are not activating our resources, so we don't produce the quality of results we desire. Other people do that consistently. It is the man or the woman who can get themselves to consistently do whatever it takes to succeed, to consistently take action. That is the man or woman who lives the life of personal excellence. And I wanted to be one of those people. And as I looked around in life, I said, is this really it? Is, action the whole thing? And of course, attitude plays a role, beliefs play a role, values play a role. But if one is taking consistent action in the direction of our goals, one begins to find out the answers that we need. And I began, as I studied successful people, to discover that they had a common formula for success. I call it the ultimate success formula. And really what it is that one, they all seem to know their outcome. They know what it is they want to accomplish out of their life, out of their communication with the person they're meeting with, out of the situation that they're going for. They know why they're doing what they're doing. They've got a reason, almost an obsession for producing a specific result that they desire. If you don't know what you want, how will you ever get it? It's like we all have this incredible biocomputer that we call our brains, and few of us are making very good use of it. Few of us are ever telling that computer what we want from it. So we don't activate the circuitry that could help us to succeed in a much more quick and much more easy and much more elegant fashion. So knowing what you want is critical and number one, paramount to being able to achieve success. The second thing these people seem to share is they have the ability to take action, this thing called personal power. Because if you know what you want and you don't do anything about it, then what happens is you have a dream, you have a wish, but it'll never be a reality. Action is the only thing that translates dreams into reality. And those who can get themselves to consistently produce the actions that are necessary will absolutely dominate the field of human success. I know that if you look out into the world and you see people are succeeding, you may do what I've done. I used to look at super successful people and say, well, they're lucky. Or, they've got a certain amount of talent, or they're gifted, or they're charismatic, or whatever. But in reality, when you begin to study the personal histories of some of the most successful people in our culture, you begin to discover that it wasn't that they had it so easy or that they were gifted, but rather that they knew what they wanted and they took action until they discovered what it took to succeed. One person who would be a great example of this is a man named Colonel Sanders. I'm sure you've heard the name. The reason you have is because there's a Colonel Sanders chicken store in almost every single city in the United States that has 30,000 people or more. That's a pretty phenomenal achievement. How did it happen? Because Colonel Sanders had so much training, so much marketing ability, because he'd had so much education, because he started when he was young, because he had tremendous amounts of capital? Of course not. None of these things are true. Colonel Sanders made the whole thing happen with only one resource, personal power. He knew what he wanted, and he got himself to take action. At the age of 65, this man received his first Social Security check. It was for $99. He looked at the check and said to himself, I ain't living like this. And he began to not just feel bad, but decide what he did want. And then he took action on it. He asked himself, what resources do I have? And at the time, one resource he seemed to have was a chicken recipe that a lot of people liked. So he came up with an idea. I'll take my chicken recipe, I'll give it to people who own restaurants, and it'll be so good, it'll increase their sales. And all I'll ask from them is that they give me a percentage of the profits that they earn as a result of my giving them my chicken recipe. So he went out and took his idea to the streets, unlike many people. He actually followed through. I mean, haven't you ever had an idea for something, a concept, a gadget, a gizmo, something that you thought, God, everybody in the world would probably want one of these. Everybody in the world would probably use one of these. And then maybe you walked into a store 6 months after you had the idea, and there was your idea on the shelf. Somebody had, quote unquote, stole it. What was the difference between them and you? Was the difference intelligence? I highly doubt it. The difference was personal power. They took action. Now, some people, when I share this, say, but they also knew what to do. The only way you find out what to do is by knowing what you want and taking some action. And that's what Colonel Sanders did. He went and knocked on his first restaurant door and put the pitch on the man on the other side of the counter. He said, sir, I have the best chicken recipe in the world. And you know what? I want to give it to you. You don't have to pay me for it. All I want you to do is give me a percentage of your increased profits on all the chicken that you ever sell. Well, as you can imagine, there wasn't a great deal of enthusiasm on the other side of the counter. The man said, look, I've already got a chicken recipe. What do I need yours for? I'm not going to give you a percentage of my profit. Get lost. Now, the neat thing about Colonel Sanders, or anyone who succeeds, is he knew his outcome, he took action, and he realized that personal power means you need to keep on taking action. So he went and knocked on another door, and another, and another, and another, being rejected each time. But each time he was rejected, he took into account the third key to success. And that is, not only did he know his outcome, not only did he take action, but the third key was he had what we call sensory acuity. Sensory acuity means he knew what he was getting. He understood and paid attention to the effect of his present actions to see, were his present actions taking him closer or further away from his goals? Every time he got a result, even if it wasn't the one he wanted, he tried to learn from that result and make an adjustment and do step 4 of the success formula, and that was change his approach. He learned from what happened, he changed his approach. Learned from what happened, changed his approach. Always remembering what he wanted, taking action, learning from what he got, changing his approach, over and over and over again. Do you know how many no's Colonel Sanders got before he got his first yes? Take a wild guess. 50, 100, 200, 300? No. He got 1,009 no's before he got his first yes. 1,009! How many of you, after about 500 no's, would probably say, I better check my recipe? How many of you can honestly say, as you're listening to this tape, that after 1,000 no's, you would have kept on knocking on those doors? The reason there are so few people named colonels, probably because not many people have much personal power. The point, very simply, though, is this. This man had the ability to get himself to do whatever it took. He had command of his own emotions and his own behaviors. He spent 2 years traveling, sleeping in the back of his car as he traveled across the nation, being rejected time after time after time. What would you think would have happened if on 1009 you still got another no? The answer is obvious. He would have gone on to 1010, 1011. He would keep on trying until he succeeded, learning from each situation, adjusting, and continuing to act on his outcomes. And by the way, this is the same way in which a pilot produces the result of flying from, say, Los Angeles to Hawaii. When an airplane takes off, it has an outcome. It wants to land in Hawaii. It takes action, of course, because you're never going to get there until you start doing something. It also has sensory acuity. Because did you know that an airplane on its flight to Hawaii is off course approximately 90% of the time? Yeah, that's a fact. What it does is it starts out in a direction and then something happens, an air pocket or an adjustment, and it gets off track. But fortunately, the pilot has a computer on board that gives him feedback to let him know what the impact is of his present actions. Is it leading him closer or further away from his target, his outcome? And what he does as soon as he sees it's not working is he changes his approach. He makes a little bit of a difference. He tries something else. And that brings him over, and he gets closer to the target. And then he tries and adjusts again, and he keeps adjusting until he reaches his goal. Success in human terms is very similar. We don't just go from where we are straight to our goals. That's not usually how life works. We have an outcome, we move in a direction, and we have to constantly adjust and move and realize what the effect is we're having on people. What do we need to have sensory acuity about? What is it that causes one person like a Colonel Sanders to be able to get himself to take action? Well, the primary component of power in our society today is something called communication. See, when man first began, power was really measured in physiological terms. He who was the strongest was in power, was in control of life and the community. It was a physiological measurement. As time went on, it became based on hierarchies. It became based upon kings and queens. And those who wanted to have power or have influence in their lives would try to develop some of that power through their association with royalty. When the industrial age came, capital was power. It was capital that allowed people to build and to change. But today, we're in a communication age. We're in an age where information is coming at us at an incredible pace. And those who can master human communication, both the communication they have with themselves and the communication that they have with others, are today in the true position of power. This is a communication seminar because for me, there is no greater skill for us to master than communication. And for me, this is the whole experience of life. Here's what I want you to jot down in your notes. Your first phrase, if you would, is just write down, the quality of my life is the quality of my communication. Pretty simple statement, and I think you'll find it's very true. The quality of your life is the quality of your communication, meaning the kind of communication you direct to yourself is the kind of experience you're going to have of life. Who do you have to master communication with first if you want to really be happy and joyous in this life? Who? Yeah, you have to do it with yourself, number one. You have to learn to master your own communication with yourself. See, when things happen in life, we have a tendency to buy into the concept that things have a meaning. And things don't have a meaning. Everything that happens in our life, the meaning of it is what we decide it to be. And oftentimes we get caught up in what the environment teaches us, what the society teaches us, what our friends tell us the meaning of something is. But we are the final source of deciding the meaning for any experience. We give it the labels. Now, for most of us, it's on automatic. And we can take charge of that back, and it's important to take charge of that back. Otherwise, you become a robot, someone who's directed by the people who know how to direct the masses, through advertisement, through promotion, etc. What we want to do is learn to take control. Let's say you're in a relationship and somebody leaves you. Well, you can have two ways of experiencing it, and the two ways will be determined by the way you communicate to yourself. Either you can go, oh God, they left me because I'm worthless, because I'm so terrible, because I'm ugly, and you'll feel pretty terrible about that. Or they can leave you and go, hallelujah! Thank God this person left, and now they'll make room for somebody who can appreciate someone of my quality. Now, depending upon how you communicate to yourself in those two situations, you'll have a whole different experience in your body, won't you? not only will you have different experience in your body, but you'll produce different behaviors, and you'll live a different kind of life. See? So the key is learning to communicate well with ourselves. I have a good friend, his name is Commander Coffee, and this man is incredible. He, during the Vietnam War, found himself spending 7 years in solitary confinement as a POW. You want to talk about a hairy experience. But you know what? He came out of that experience totally joyous, totally excited about life and who he was and who he'd become. How did he do it? He mastered his communication with himself. He got shot down. And when he first got picked up, he thought to himself, you know, I might be here a while. You know, I better take real good care of myself. I better figure out how I'm going to turn this into an advantage. I better figure out what kind of tools I'm going to use in my mind to communicate to myself this is an advantage. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And he thought, well, listen, this really is an advantage. Why? Where else, when else would I have this much time to spend with just me? You know, he said, think of how well I'm going to get to know myself. You know, I would have been distracted by all these other things. He said, I've got an opportunity here to get closer to God, really close to God, because there'll be nobody else to talk to. He said, I get a chance to really work on my body because there'll be a little else that I can do. And so as a result, for 7 years, this man worked on his mind, his emotions, and his body. He mastered his communication to himself. They didn't let him bathe for 2 months at a time. I mean, they'd come in and they'd put animals inside his cage, little rats and other things, as if there weren't enough there, and then bet on how scared he'd get or how he'd react or whether he'd kill it and eat it because they wouldn't feed him for a week at a time. I mean, unbelievable stuff, but he came out totally transformed. And when he said, look, you know what? I wouldn't trade it for all the money, all the experience in the world. It was the most powerful thing that's ever happened in my life. Why did he have that kind of experience while other people came out, you know, a basket case? Because he mastered his communication with himself. I know of very little else that's more important. I have the good fortune now to be able to do private consultations with Fortune 500 executives, with very, very successful people in the entertainment industry, as well as the average person like you and me. And what's really interesting is we all have these illusions that when people really succeed on this massive scale, you know, at least economically, you would think that they're going to be so happy, they'd be so alive, right? Their life would just be so great. And the reality is it's far from true. Some of the most powerful, successful people in this culture who I've had the very good fortune of working with, the reason I worked with them is because they had major problems. I mean, what happens is they get out there and they haven't mastered their communication with themselves. They've communicated well with the outside world, that's why they were successful. And in case you want to know what it takes to succeed in the outside world, it's communication with the outside world in a way that makes people respond, in a way that gets people to take action, in a way that gets people to buy, gets people to try. Isn't that what a Reagan and a Rose have together, a beet rose? Isn't that what a Springsteen and a Spielberg have in common? The ability really to communicate in a way that affects the masses. So that's what it takes for external success. And many people have mastered that, but have not mastered the internal side. That's how John Belushi's end up the way they do. Right? That's how Elvis Presley's end up the way they do. Great people who've mastered the outer communication, but not the inner. And I'm here today to say that we need to master them both. I'm here to say you got to master your own communication so that no matter what happens in your life, you're in charge, you're happy, you are alive, you are vibrant, and you make your life the way you want it. And in addition, you need to master your ability to communicate with others. Because the more you do that, the more external success you can also generate, and why not have it all? That's the way I'd like to live, and that's the way I'd like to entice you, if you don't already believe this, to live as well. So in this tape program, we're going to learn all the ways that we can to more effectively communicate with ourselves to produce outstanding results in our lives, and how to communicate more effectively with others. Because my belief system says, and my experience shows, that if you can find other people's needs and fill them, to the degree that you fill other people's needs, they will fill your needs. The only way that's going to happen is if you learn to communicate effectively. Communication is the ultimate power. The quality of our lives is the quality of our communication to ourselves and to others. Now, we're going to talk specifically about how to direct your emotions and behavior so that no matter what happens in your life, you're in charge of your emotion and your behavior. So how did I change my life? What did I do? Well, the first thing I had to do was I had to start with the way I was communicating with myself. At the time, I was communicating myself and putting myself down. I was tearing myself up. I knew the information, but I was not using my body, my facial expressions, my breathing patterns, my gestures, as if I was in control of my life. I was moving in a very limp way. I was moving in a very lazy way. My facial expressions were usually downtrodden. And as a result, that's how I felt in my body, and that's the kind of results I was producing. So what I began to do when I learned about NLP was I learned how to reprogram my brain. I learned how to take the things that were depressing me and program new responses into my nervous system. I had to reprogram the way I was thinking, so that when the challenges of life came up, instead of feeling downtrodden or trying to pump myself up through positive thinking by saying, I can handle it, instead of doing that, I rigged it. I literally linked it, as you will learn to do, so that the very things that used to make me upset automatically triggered me into feeling resourceful, powerful, and challenged by life, like I could handle whatever happened to me. When I made these changes in reprogramming my communication to myself, I began to feel better. And when I learned to communicate better with other people, I was able to enlist their assistance in producing the results that I wanted for my life. The result? I went in 1 year from living in my 400 square foot bachelor apartment, physically run down, emotionally run down, and 38 pounds overweight, to a year later, 38 pounds lighter, in a relationship with a woman I loved, and then finally married. I became a millionaire in less than a year. And my new home is now a 10,000 square foot castle overlooking the crashing waves of Del Mar, California. I get to travel all over the world and share ideas that matter with people who care. And I don't tell you all these things to impress you. I tell you because it impresses me. It's incredible for me to see how much can happen in 1 year just by learning how to run my brain, just by finding and studying what people do to get themselves to take action instead of just knowing what to do. Now, let's take a look at super successes in the culture, and let's look for common patterns. In the beginning of this program, I said I've always been interested in the differences in people, why some people succeed under the most dire and difficult circumstances, while others barely get by and feel unhappy when they're surrounded by success emotionally, socially, spiritually, and physiologically. What I'm also interested in is what creates a super success, what creates a champion. What is it that a Steven Spielberg and a Bruce Springsteen share in common that allow them to affect the culture in such a massively positive way? What is it that gave Kennedy and King the power to transform so many lives, both emotionally and behaviorally? What is it that makes a Pete Rose and a Ronald Reagan unique? What is it that a Tina Turner and a Ted Turner share in terms of characteristics? Because my experience has shown that success leaves clues. That is, people who succeed do certain things over and over and over again. And if you find out what people do in their minds and in their bodies that creates for them high peak emotional states and effective behaviors, if you take the same actions mentally and physically, you'll produce the same results. I call that process modeling. And NLP taught me to model people with more precision than ever before. I found out how to do exactly what they were doing in their head to produce a result.
For example, I went to the United States Army, and I went to a general there. And I said, General, I can take anything that you're teaching presently in the entire Army, any training program, and I cut the training time in half, and I can increase the competency simultaneously. He went, you're crazy. I said, no, sir, I'm expensive. We worked out a deal where he would give me projects he thought were impossible. That is, they could not be improved upon. I would cut them in half. If I cut them in half and increased the competency, I would be paid. If I didn't, I would not. The Army had nothing to lose. I had everything to lose if I didn't produce the result, and everything to gain if I did. So sure enough, we put this project together, and I went to work on the project. And I thought they'd give me like a 6-month training program, right? I figured, God, there'd be these holes in here, and I'd find them. They gave me a 4-day training program. They also gave me a product I was not excited about, pistol shooting. I mean, I didn't go to the Army to enhance the Army's ability to kill people. I went to the Army because I knew by using these skills, I could affect the thinking processes of various people simultaneously who were decision makers about what our choices are and how to handle aggression and to look at our world. And I was looking to be able to have that kind of rapport and that kind of connection. So they give me this project I'm not thrilled about, and they said, look, we have a 4-day pistol shooting program. Here in our division, it takes 4 days to do it, and we can only qualify 70% of the people, which means 30% fail every single time in their program. I said, great, I'll cut it in half and I'll increase the competency. They said, great, we'll introduce you to the pistol coach. I said, no, I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to the best shooters in the world. You bring me the best shooters, I'll find out what makes them best, and we'll teach that. So they gave me the #1 shooter in the Army, the national shooter, and their pistol shooting coach. They all come down to meet me. I'm down this underground shooting range. Here I am, I'm in a t-shirt, a pair of jeans, because I know I'm just going to be kicking back that day. Look at Cuddy Young. So sure enough, these guys walk in and they go, "Where's the teacher?" And I go, "I'm him." They go, "Ha ha ha, where's the teacher?" I said, "I'm him." Now bear in mind, these guys have been shooting 20 and 24 years respectively. I was 24 years old at the time. They said, "How many years have you been shooting guns?" I said, "Well, I've never shot a gun before, but it should be fun." Now they laugh and say, "You're joking." I said, "No, I'm not joking." They said, "You're going to teach us?" I said, "Yes, I don't have to know all the stuff about shooting first. I first have to know your beliefs." They go, "Beliefs have nothing to do with shooting." I said, "It has more to do with it than you realize." They go, "Let's see you shoot." I said, "Look, I don't know how yet." They said, "Let's see you shoot." I said, "Fine, give me a gun." I said, "Show me how to load it." They go, "Show you how to load it?" So they showed me how to load it. I pointed at them. They didn't like that. I go to fire the gun. I don't like guns. I'm kind of shaking like this, and I'm shooting a 45 caliber pistol, which if you ever shot one has a kick to it, right? So I'm shaking like this, boom. The thing kicks back, and I put the bullet up in the ceiling, not anywhere near the target. These guys would have left if they could have, but they were on orders. So I said, "Look, let me sit down and find out your beliefs." So I went through a process on how to elicit the key belief systems that someone has. And I found that these shooters, the best shooters in the nation, had 32 specific beliefs about shooting that were totally different than the people I interviewed who could not pass the class. So what did I do? I took their 32 beliefs about shooting and instilled them within myself, literally installed them, if you will, inside my own belief structures. So the bottom line is I put those beliefs in, and then I moved on to the second key to duplicating excellence, and jot down what number 2 is. The second key to duplicating any form of human excellence is called duplicate the person's mental syntax. Syntax sounds like a complicated word. It's actually very simple. I'll give you an example of syntax. If I say to you, "The dog bit Johnny," you all know what that means, right? Of course, no problem. What if I say, "Johnny bit the dog"? Different experience, isn't it? Especially if you're Johnny or the dog. Now, what did I do? Did I add or subtract words? Absolutely not. All I did was change the what? The order and sequence, also known as the what? Syntax. By changing the syntax of words or even the way you use your nervous system, you absolutely instantly change the meaning and the result. For example, we all have 5 senses. The order in which we use those 5 senses determines the kind and quality of results that we produce. For example, in order to spell effectively, you use various aspects of your 5 senses, don't you? If you want to spell a word. Some people are excellent spellers, some are poor spellers. The difference is the syntax of whether they visualize the word or sound the word out first or try to feel it out first, and the order in which these do things make all the difference. For example, how many of you are really great spellers? Let me see a show of hands. Really great. How many of you are really lousy spellers? Raise your hand, tell the truth. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're a bad speller, tell me the truth, yes or no. If you're a bad speller, does that mean you're less intelligent than a good speller, yes or no? No. Bad spellers always say no. Which is true, by the way, okay? Because spelling has nothing to do with intelligence. Intelligence has a great to do with syntax, the order and sequence in which you use pictures, sounds, feelings within yourself. And we're going to study this in great detail and show you how you can find out your syntax that causes you to be motivated. There's a syntax that causes you to fall in love, a syntax of pictures, sounds, and feelings. And once you understand the syntax, it's like a code. And you can punch in that code anytime, and your body will go into that same state consistently. All I did was take that syntax, record it, install it in myself. Then I moved on to the third key to duplicating any form of human excellence. And the third key is duplicate a person's physiology. Physiology, posture, breathing pattern, muscle tension or relaxation. How you use your body determines what portion of your brain you're using. See, when people are depressed, don't they take on a specific physiology? Think of a depressed person, what are they? Slumped shoulders, what are their eyes? Down, breathing is what? Shallow, right? And if you put yourself in the same physiology, you'll feel the same way. People that are vibrant, energized, they have a different posture, a different breathing pattern. In fact, this is so powerful that when you duplicate someone's physiology, if you do it exactly, identically as they are using their nervous system, if you duplicate them, then what happens is you start firing off the same messages in your brain as they're firing off in theirs. So let's say a man comes along, spends 10 years of his life to discover the key way to run his mind and body to produce some unique result. If you come in and duplicate his physiology, you don't have to go through all the trial and error. You start running your brain the same way he is running his brain, right away. That's incredible, because if you start using your nervous system the same way he uses his, you'll start producing similar results. If you sow the same seeds, you'll reap the same rewards. Now, it is so powerful. I know this sounds a little bit like, ABC. Oh, could it really be that simple? You bet it is. That's the power of duplicating physiology. So what I do with these shooters, they've spent 20 years adjusting their body in every way, right? Till finally they found a physiology that assists them in being in the optimum state for shooting a .45 caliber gun effectively. So I don't have to go through the trial and error. I just model their physiology. Find out what part of the physiology is critical versus what part's idiosyncratic, and then model it. That is duplicated in myself. Well, what's the result? Well, I take what I've learned, the key beliefs, the mental syntax, the strategy they're using, and the physiology, and I put them into a training program where I take new recruits, and in one day, before they ever touch a gun, I install the beliefs, the same beliefs these guys have. I install the same strategy, even though they never shot a gun. I install the same physiology before they ever pick up a gun. Now we finally give them a gun, and all of a sudden, guess what? In a day and a morning, we qualify 100% of the people on my program instead of 70% with the Army. 100%. Not only that, we tripled the number of people that qualified at the highest level called expert. In other words, they only get so many in 4 days to become expert. We tripled the number it took them 4 days to do in a day and a morning. Incredible. The colonel who was the head of the project wrote the general and said it was the first breakthrough in pistol shooting since World War I. Now the purpose of this is not for you to go, wow, isn't Robbins a great modeler? The purpose is that I want you to leave here this weekend, this 4-day period of time, realizing that who could have done what I did there? Who? Who? You. As long as you duplicated those people's, number one, they're what? Number two, there? And number three, there? See, that's my goal for you. My goal is you leave here, and when you see somebody do something that's outstanding, instead of going, wow, aren't they great? You go, wow, aren't they great? And if I want to do that, I'm willing to commit some time and some energy, then I can do it too if I duplicate beliefs, syntax, and physiology. And that's been the reality that I've experienced in training. Even things that seem to be impossible to me, I've been able to do that with. And you'll find the same for yourself.
That's what modeling is all about. And in this tape program, you're going to learn how to model with more precision than ever before, because you're going to learn how to find out what people are doing in their head more precisely than maybe even they knew in their past. By the way, as a gift, I took these 3 shooters who I'd been modeling and taught them the best of what they knew from each other. I trained them in 1 hour. Each of them improved their score. The best pistol shooter in the nation at that time scored higher than he had in 6 months after 1 hour of instruction from me, a guy who'd never shot a gun before. The second man I trained with shot more bullseyes than ever in his career. And the coach, who was also there, gave both of his men a run for the money. The point is, whether someone has a successful relationship, whether they are effective in motivating their children, whether they're effective in eating in a way that keeps themselves slim and trim and healthy, whatever a human being does, there's a way to model it. All you have to do is find out what they're doing and do the same things. So in that light, let's look at some general belief systems or characteristics that champions seem to share in common. I call these the 7 fundamental character traits of a champion. These are the 7 things that cause people who succeed on a massive scale to consistently take action and do whatever is necessary to produce the results that they want in their life. And let's just go through them quickly. Trait number 1 is passion. All of these people have discovered a reason, a consuming, energizing, almost obsessive purpose that drives them to do, to grow, and to be more. It gives them the fuel that powers their success train and causes them to tap their true potential. It's passion that causes a Pete Rose to continuously dive headfirst into second base as if he was still a rookie playing in his first major league game. It's passion that sets the actions of Lee Iacocca apart from so many others. It's passion that drives the computer scientists through years of dedication to create the kind of breakthroughs that have put men and women in outer space and brought them back again. It's passion that causes people to stay up late and get up early. It's passion that people want in their relationships. Passion gives life power and juice and meaning. There is no greatness without a passion to be great. Whether it's the aspiration of an athlete, an artist, a scientist, a parent, or a businessman, we all discover that the key to our success is to find something that mobilizes us, something that gives us an obsessive desire to use and be all we can be and to do all that we can do to create our lives exactly as we envision it. Where do we get a passion? Well, we're going to talk about that when we talk about the power of goal setting. But just for now, realize one of the ways that you can develop a passion is get around where it's better and let something hit you. Surround yourself with passionate people, and you'll begin to discover that something will grab you, something will magnify your desires, something can capture you. But you've got to try many things. You've got to attempt many things. Does a Spielberg have a passion for movie making? You bet. It's more than a job. It's a career. It's a lifestyle. And that is what envisions him to take action day after day, no matter what happens around him. Trait number 2, belief. Every religious book on the planet talks about the power and the effect of faith and belief on mankind. People who succeed on a major scale differ greatly in their beliefs from those people who fail. Our beliefs about what we are and what we can be precisely determine what we will be. If we believe in magic, we'll live a magical life. If we believe our life is defined by narrow limits, then we've suddenly made those limits real. What we believe to be true, what we believe is possible, becomes what's true. It becomes what's possible. This set of tapes will teach you specific scientific ways to quickly change your beliefs so that they support you in the attainment of your most desired goals rather than limiting you. Many people are passionate, but because of their limiting beliefs about who they are and what they can do, they never take the actions that could make their dreams into a reality. People who succeed know what they want and believe they can get it. Now, passion and belief help to provide the fuel, the propulsion, if you will, that pushes us toward excellence. But propulsion's not enough. If it were, it'd be enough to fuel a rocket and send it flying blindly toward the heavens. Besides the power, we need a path. We need an intelligent sense of logical progression. To succeed in hitting a target, we need trait number 3, a strategy. A strategy is a way of organizing our resources. When Steven Spielberg decided to become a filmmaker, he mapped out a course that would lead to the world that he wanted to conquer. He figured out what he wanted to learn, whom he needed to know, what he needed to do. He had a passion, yes, he had a belief, but he also had a strategy that would make those things work to their greatest potential. Every great entertainer, politician, parent, or employer knows that it's not enough to have the resources to succeed. One must use those resources in the most effective way. A strategy is a recognition that the best talents and ambitions also need to find the right avenue. You can open a door by breaking it down, or you can find the key that opens it intact. In this tape program, we're going to learn how to model the most effective strategies of others. Trait number 4, clarity of values. When we think of things that made America great, we think of things like patriotism and pride, a sense of tolerance, and a love of freedom. These things are values, the fundamental, ethical, moral, and practical judgments we make about what's most important, what really matters in our lives. Values are simply specific belief systems that we have about what is right and wrong for our lives. They're the judgments we make about what makes life worth living. Many people don't have a clear idea of what's most important to them in their lives. Many times people do things in their lives, and then afterwards they're very unhappy with themselves. They have internal conflict. And the reason is because, although they're taking actions on one level, there's a part of them that doesn't believe what they're doing is right. When we look at the great successes, they're almost always people with a clear, fundamental sense about what really matters. I mean, think of the Ronald Reagans, the John F. Kennedys, the Martin Luther Kings, the John Waynes, the Jane Fondas, the Gandhis, the Bill Cosbys. They all have different visions, but what they have in common is a fundamental moral grounding, a sense of who they are and why they do what they do. An understanding of values is one of the most rewarding and challenging keys to achieving success, and one we'll definitely investigate in this tape program. As you've probably noticed, all these traits feed on and interact with one another. Is passion affected by our beliefs? Of course it is. The more we believe we can accomplish something, the more we're usually willing to invest in its achievement. Is belief by itself enough to achieve excellence? Well, hey, it's a good start. But if you believe you're going to see a sunrise and your strategy for achieving that goal is to begin running west, then you're going to have some problems. Are our strategies for success affected by our values? You bet. If your strategy for success requires you to do things that don't fit your unconscious beliefs about what is right or wrong for your life, then even that strategy won't work. This is often seen in individuals who begin to succeed only to end up sabotaging their own success. The problem is there's an internal conflict between what the individual values most internally and their strategy for achieving external success. All 4 of the things we've already considered are inseparable from trait number 5, energy.
you must have a thing called energy. Energy. Energy is the source. Nothing happens without energy. And the more that you have, the more of your personal potential you're going to tap into. But see, energy is like the gas that drives the car of success, and you don't want to run out of emotional gas when you're climbing the hill of success. Otherwise, you'll find yourself coasting back downhill. And that's what happens to a lot of people. How many of you, for example, can remember a day when you woke up feeling really tired and lethargic? How many can remember a day like that? For some of you, it was recent. Now, when you wake up feeling like really tired and lethargic, do you usually jump up and go, God, I can't wait to go out, change the world, help people, help my own self, change everything that's happening in this world so it's better? Is that usually what you do when you wake up feeling lethargic? Not usually the first thought, is it? Right? First thought's, where's the coffee? Next thought is, oh God, not another Monday. You know, when I came here to New York, I got an education. I first started coming here about 2 years ago. And I remember about my third trip in, I came on a Wednesday, and midweek, and I'm sitting in the back of the car here, right? And I turn on the stereo. And I'm kicking back, just enjoying the music. And after the song is over, the DJ comes on. He goes, all right out there, ladies and gentlemen, we made it. It's hump day. Do you know what hump day is? Wednesday. Yeah, some people look at Wednesday as hump day, which means you're over the hump. You're more than half the way to the weekend. Can you imagine that large numbers of people spend 5 days out of every 7 looking forward to only 2 of them? Some people live for 2 days out of every 7. Can you imagine living that way, having such a boring, disgusting life that you look forward to 2 out of 7? Hey, you know what's worse? In California, there is a new club that's formed. They call it the Thank God It's Fridays Club. It's a group of people that look forward to 1 day out of 7. Right? Can you imagine? And you know what these people who look forward to the weekend do on those 2 days? They do things to their mind and body so that on Monday they can't even remember what happened on those 2 days. I mean, that's what they do with these days they look forward to. They go, what'd you do this week? Oh, shit, can't even remember. See, the bottom line is my Mondays are better than most people's Christmases because I've learned how to communicate to myself. See, in a way where I can find the passion and I've got something I'm working towards and for. And I've also, most importantly, got the physical energy to make it happen. Because without that, we get caught in the trap of making a living instead of designing a life. And that's an ugly trap to get into. You know what I'm talking about? Well, you have so little energy that you go to work, you fight the traffic home, you watch a little TV, get a bite to eat, say hello to your lover or husband or wife, and get to bed. To wake up in the morning to start the same old thing all over again. And you know what's really sad? A lot of the people that live this way are incredibly intelligent. They're incredibly committed human beings. They really have a vision for themselves and for the world, but you know what they're really missing? Energy. They don't have enough physical vibrancy to tap who they are. And as a result, they get caught in the trap where at the end of their life, they discover they've lived 1/10 of it. All because they didn't have enough energy. I can't think of anything that's more important to get you to take action daily than to have that sense of physical abundance, of energy abundance. How many of you can remember a day when you had that incredible vibrancy from the moment you woke up, you had that energy? How many of you can remember a day like that? On a day like that, remember how you felt? On a day like that, were you not in a position where you tapped more of your potential? How many found that that was true? You bet. Not only did you tap more of your potential, but even the challenges of life affect you differently, don't they? When you're vibrant and something happens that normally wipes you out, you have a different sense about it. You still have a sense of possibility because there are resources available there. In your emotion, in your body, it's available. See, I remember Vince Lombardi. Remember him, the great Green Bay Packer coach? He used to have a great phrase. He said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. See, if you're tired, that's the first thing to make you feel like, oh, I don't even feel like trying. Sometimes the failure to try is physical, right? You wake up in the morning, your mind says, let's go get them, and your body says, I can't even get out of bed. You know? The Bible phrase that says, sometimes the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak. Yeah, you don't want to be in that place. You want to have the congruency of knowing that your mind and your body are one. And one of the ways to create that congruency is to make sure you have physical vibrancy. Physical energy.
Remember, energy is the fuel that drives your success train, and you don't want to run out of emotional gas when you're climbing the hill of success. Trait number 6, bonding power. Nearly all successful people I've studied have in common an extraordinary ability to bond with others, the ability to connect with and develop deep rapport with people from a variety of backgrounds and beliefs. Sure, there's the occasional mad genius who invents something that changes the world, but if the genius spends all his time in a lonely warren, he'll succeed on one level but fail on many others. The great successes of our culture and our world all have the ability to form bonds that unite them with millions of others. And of course, the greatest success is not on the stage of the world. It's in the deepest recesses of your own heart. Deep down, everyone needs to form lasting, loving bonds with others. Without that, any success, any excellence is hollow indeed. We all want that sense of connection with people that we meet. And bonding power is a skill that anyone can develop, one that will allow you to tap higher levels of success than you may have ever imagined before. The final trait number 7, mastery of communication. This is the essence of everything, of course, that we've talked about so far and everything we'll be talking about in the future. The way we communicate with others and the way we communicate with ourselves ultimately determines the quality of our lives. People who succeed in life are those who have learned how to take any challenge that life gives them and communicate that experience to themselves in a way that causes them to successfully change. People who fail take the adversities of life and accept them as limitations. The people who shape our lives and our cultures are also masters of communication to others. What they have in common is an ability to communicate a vision or a quest or a joy or a mission. Mastery of communication is what makes a great parent, a great artist, or a great politician, or a great teacher. Everything in this tape program will be directed towards teaching you how to more effectively communicate to yourself or to others to produce new emotions and new behaviors. So as we review these 7 character traits, how many of them are you experiencing in your life right now? Do you have that passionate desire for something? Do you believe you can really make it happen? Have you developed a strategy yet to make your goals a reality? Are you really clear on your values and what's most important to you in life? Do you have the energy that will be necessary to produce the results that you want? Do you have the ability to meet anyone and in a few moments bond with them and have them feel responsive to you, develop that sense of rapport? Have you mastered the way you communicate to yourself so that you take action instead of being immobilized? Have you learned to communicate to other people in a way that emboldens them to action? Most of us would have to say that we have some of these in alignment, but not all. This tape program is designed for us to learn how to install them all in ourselves. But first, just take a moment and look back at these 7 character traits and see if you believe they really do make a difference. Think of someone that you know personally who's successful, maybe the top salesman in your office, maybe a business person. Are they passionate? Do they have incredible beliefs that are different than maybe the ones you've held in the past? What kind of strategy have they developed? Run through the list, and I think you'll find that these character traits are consistent with people who succeed on a large scale. I can tell you several examples, one of which would be Steven Spielberg. A lot of times when people see someone who's succeeding, again, they think, wow, what a gifted young man. What a lucky man he was to have all this creativity. But in reality, we can all develop creativity if we're passionate enough about something. Steven Spielberg is where he is today, not because someone gave him a gift, but because he was passionate, he believed, he developed a strategy, he was clear on what was most important to him, he had the energy to follow through, he developed rapport, and he mastered communication, both to himself and to others in the form of movies.
Why is Steven Spielberg this great, successful man? Because he had this tremendous creativity and genius. That genius was developed by practicing his craft day after day. He's known he wanted to be involved with movies. He's had a love for movies since he was 13 years old. When he was 17 years old, he decided to go on the Universal Studios tour in California, and he went on the tram and got real bored real fast. He said, I want to see real movies. So he had a thing called personal what? So he got himself to take action. He snuck away from the tram, and he got down to the movie lot, and he actually stepped onto a filming and actually watched some filming going on. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he also had a tool called rapport. And he developed rapport with the director and started talking with this man. And this guy liked this moxie little kid, young kid, right, who seemed to have this real desire, and he loved the creativity and the intensity that he saw in this young man. And so he told him about what it was like to be a producer and a director, and told him it was the greatest career he could ever have, and he should do whatever it took to become one. And then finally the man said, okay, now it's time for you to go, and the security escorted him off the lot. Now, for most people, that would have been, God, what a neat story, huh? You're 17, you get to meet a real director, watch a real filming instead of just going on the tour. But see, once again, this man was totally committed to a dream. And so guess what? Using his personal what? Power, he took action. And the next day, he came up with a plan. He showed up at the Universal's lot wearing this one suit that he owned and borrowed his dad's old briefcase, threw in there a candy bar and a couple sandwiches, and he walked by purposely, congruently past the guard and went, "Hey, how's it going, Harry?" Of course, he got the guy's name by reading his name tag. But he was so congruent that Harry just went, "Oh, hi," and he walked right on by. So now he's in the lot where he now goes around meeting people, watching movies, learning, right? Knowing his outcome, taking action, getting some sensory cueing, learning what worked and what didn't work in movie making. And he went there every day after school and throughout the summer. So people began, the guard would say, Harry would say, "Hey, how's it going, Stephen? How are your movies coming?" "Hey, great, it's really fabulous." He found himself an abandoned trailer. There are lots of them on Universal Studios lot. He found one, cleaned it out, got some plastic letters. On the outside, he wrote, "Steven Spielberg, director." People say, "Where's your office?" He said, "Over there at, K9 and everything else." People come to his office. One day, finally, a director said to him, "Well, let's see one of your movies." So he pops out this Super 8 cartridge. He said, "Well, wait, we got to see a real movie." He said, "You seem to know a lot about that. How did you learn so much about movies?" Well, he spent 2 years or a year on the lot, right? Being there, developing acuity, developing and stuff, getting creative, letting his mind run, totally committed to his outcome. So finally he said, "Look, if you'll make a film and show it to us, a short film," he said, "we may hire you." So he went out and convinced one of his friends who was in my seminar last week, and I told the story, and this guy got up and said, "I financed that original film." It took $10,000, and Steven Spielberg made this little film about a group of teenagers that went from the desert and hitchhiked to California. And this guy financed it. It was amazing. Anyway, bottom line is, he showed up at Universal Studios, and they hired him with a 7-year contract to make television programs. Not bad. Why was he there? Because he had this great gift? His great gift was commitment to an outcome. He'd do whatever it took. And out of his personal power, he took action until he found a way to make it work. That's where the power is. Commitment to practice what is important to you, to do whatever it takes, and not to accept less than you can be. Not to accept results that are less than you deserve or anyone that you support or represent. That's critical.
One of my favorite examples of personal power and these fundamental character traits making the difference in the quality of life is the story of Honda International. Honda is now a company that's doing $11 billion in sales. They're the largest manufacturer of motorbikes in the world. How'd they get started? Well, there was a man named Honda who had a passion, a desire. He was so passionate about his goal that in 1938, he took all of his money, everything he owned, and invested it in a little workshop where he began to work on piston rings, something he wanted to sell to Toyota Corporation at the time. He worked day and night, sleeping there, never leaving, always believing he could produce the result. He was up to his elbows in grease. He even pawned his wife's jewelry in order to stay in business. After completing his piston rings and trying to sell it to Toyota, Toyota turned him down, said that the piston ring didn't meet their standards. He went back to school for 2 years, where he got to hear laughter from his instructors and fellow students as they looked at his designs as being absurd. But at the end of 2 years, his designs brought results because he knew what he wanted, he took action, he learned from each effort, and he kept changing his approach till he got what he wanted. Toyota said, "Fine, you have a contract." He was ecstatic. He was excited. His passion and his belief had paid off. But then a new problem came about. The Japanese government was tooling for war, and they refused to give him the concrete that would be necessary to build his factory. Did he quit here? Of course not. He just developed another strategy. He used his bonding and rapport tools to get a series of men to work with him, to learn a new process for creating his own concrete, and he built his own factory. During the war, his factory was bombed twice, destroying major portions of his manufacturing facility. Rather than being depressed about the destruction of his factories, he would just immediately rush out, grab his men, and pick up all the extra gasoline cans that the U.S. fighters threw away. He called them gifts from President Truman because they provided him with the raw materials needed for his manufacturing process. Finally, after all of this, an earthquake leveled his factory, and Honda finally decided to sell his piston operation to Toyota. Now, here's a man who had passion, here's a man who had belief, here's a man who had strategy, here's a man who was totally clear about what was most important in his life, here's a man who had almost unending energy. Here's a man who had tremendous rapport with other people, and here's a man who managed through all of this to continue to communicate to himself and other people in a way that kept him going, kept him succeeding, and yet still he'd not produced the ultimate result that he wanted. The result was to come later, after several other attempts at manufacturing concerns in which he failed. Finally, in 1947, a tremendous gasoline shortage in Japan occurred after the war, and Honda couldn't even use his car to go get food for his family. Finally, in desperation, he attached a small motor to his bicycle. The next thing he knew, a neighbor asked him if he'd make him one, and then another, and then another, and another, until finally he ran out of motors. Finally, he decided he ought to get into building motors, and he started a little manufacturing concern doing that. His challenges weren't up yet, but for a passionate man who believes and who can develop strategy, he found a way around the next challenge, which was the Japanese government. The Japanese government had developed laws to limit the use of gasoline. So in order to be able to power his motorbikes, Honda developed a strategy of running them on pine resin. He would squeeze the resin out of pine and mix it with gasoline he bought on the black market. This created a turpentine-like smell, which allowed him to travel without the Japanese government being upset. They knew it wasn't gasoline he was using. How did he finally take it to the largest level? Did he get someone to give him a large amount of money? No, that was strategy also. He had a strategy where he used his rapport skills to appeal to the values of 18,000 bicycle shop owners. He wrote them a letter stating his dream for a revitalized Japan through the new mobility that motorbikes could provide. And he talked to them about how they could play a role in making a difference in the country as a whole. And he got 5,000 of those 18,000 to sign up and help advance the capital necessary to go into business. Still, only the hardcore bicycle fans bought these motorbikes. They were too big. So he made another adjustment. He always knew his outcome. He always took action. He always learned from what he was getting, and he changed his approach. He created a scaled-down motorbike he called the Cub. It became a quote-unquote overnight success, and Mr. Honda was given the Emperor's Award. He later began to import these motorbikes to the baby boomers of Europe and the United States, and finally followed that up in the 70s with the cars. Today, Honda Corporation employs over 100,000 people in both the United States and Japan, and it is here today and succeeds today because of the passion, the beliefs, the strategy, the values, the energy, the bonding power, and the mastery of communication.
Close your eyes and use visualization techniques. You may want to wait to listen to this side until you're not driving, so you can relax completely and get full benefit from this tape.
We've talked about so far the power of human communication, but what are we using communication for? I've talked about using communication to get yourself to take action, but really, what do we need to do to get ourselves to take action? How do we need to communicate to ourselves? What's the element that makes the difference in the quality of how you behave and how you feel? Well, the element that I believe makes a difference is something I call state. Your state of mind and emotions at any moment in time will determine how much of your resources are available to you.
How many of you, as an example, just to kind of help us find out what the cause or the creation of human behavior is, how many of you have ever had an experience where you did something, and then after you did it, you went, oh, God, I can't even believe I did that? How many of you have had that experience? How many of you, same people, have been in a similar situation where after you did something, you went, yeah, that was me? Same situation, yet look at the difference in results. One time you don't even want to talk about it, the other one you're happy to chat about it. How come? How come you're producing such varied behaviors in the same basic situation? And the answer is because your behavior was the result of the state that you were in at that time. See, state was basically the generator or the governor of human behavior. Your behaviors are the result of the state you're in. That's how you can explain times when you went, God, I can't even believe I did that. It's because you were in a state where you were not as resourceful as usual. So now the next question, of course, is, well, what creates state? Well, basically two things generate state. One of the things that generates state that's most obvious is physiology. That is, how you physically feel will determine greatly how you're using your body, your biochemical functioning, your posture, your breathing pattern will definitely affect the kind of state you're in. If you're sitting in a posture that's sort of like this, and you're breathing really, shallow, and you got this kind of tonality and stuff, do you really feel like you'd be really motivated to do all kinds of stuff in your life? probably not the most powerful state to be in, okay? Because that will affect you, won't it? When you're physically run down, do you not respond differently than when you're physically vibrant, yes or no? Yes. Of course you do. So physiology tremendously affects state and therefore behavior, okay? Now the other thing that's equally powerful in affecting someone's state and thus their behavior is the way they represent the world inside themselves. We call these things internal representations. Internal representations, the way we represent what's going on inside our own head. In other words, the pictures that we make on our head, what we picture and how we picture it. What we say to ourselves and how we say it to ourselves, the tone of voice that we use in our head, those things affect our state. See, if you go, yeah, I really want to do this, or if you go, I really want to do this, doesn't that tonality make a difference in your state? You bet. So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. It's not just what you picture, but how you picture it. Those things affect state and determine behavior just as much as physiology does. The two work together. In fact, if you feel physically vibrant, you usually perceive the world differently, don't you? If you perceive the world differently, that also changes your physical vibrancy. Have you ever been in a situation where you're physically tired and then something caught your interest, really got you excited mentally, and all of a sudden you felt physically strong and energized? How many have had that experience? Of course. So these two are on what we call a cybernetic loop, where if you change one, the other one changes automatically. Okay, they're linked together. The ideal is to change them both simultaneously so they support you in going the kind of state that'll support you in producing the kind of behavior that you want.
Behavior is the result of the state that we're in, and the state we are in is the result of how we represent things internally, meaning, again, what we picture in our minds and what we say or hear in our minds, as well as our biochemical functioning, our breathing patterns, our muscular tension and relaxation. If you learn to direct the way you represent things mentally and the way in which you use your body, you can direct any aspect of your life. For example, a woman came into me recently and she was very, very upset. She was extremely depressed and had been, according to her, for the last 12 years. Her response to me immediately as she walks in the room is I can see how she's producing this state called depression. She's doing it by the way she uses her body. So she tells me on and on about all the depressing things she does and how she's even depressed when she's sleeping as she begins to weep and cry in front of me. And I simply turn to her and I say, that's fascinating. How do you do that? She looked at me quite startled. What do you mean, how do I do this? I'm just depressed. I just feel so terrible. Well, how do you get yourself to feel so terrible? I asked her. She said, I don't know. It just happens to me. I said, no, it doesn't just happen to you. You have to do certain things in your mind and certain things in your body to feel depressed. I said, you have to send certain messages. I explained to her, there are no results in your life, either emotional or behavioral, without some cause, without you taking some mental or physical action or a combination thereof. I said, what are you doing with your body that makes you feel depressed? She goes, I don't know. I said, well, let me show you. If I were to take on your physiology, let's see if I can feel as depressed as you. And I began to contort my posture, and I began to drop my shoulders and look down and create muscular tension in my face and squint. I said, yeah, now I feel pretty lousy. Now let me mimic your voice tone. Oh, I feel terrible. Yeah, I said, now I'm really feeling lousy. I said, now what are you picturing in your mind? What are you saying to yourself? She goes, well, I'm just picturing the worst thing that could happen. I said, oh, yeah, now I feel totally depressed, too. Now I know how I can do it. I just have to think this way and use my body this way consistently, and I'd be depressed. She looked at me and she smiled. I said, would you like to change? She said, well, that's why I'm here. I said, well, start by changing the quality of your voice tone. Say, that's why I'm here, and use a different tone of voice. She said, that's why I'm here. I said, no, try it a little differently. Say, that's why I'm here. She said, that's why I'm here. All of a sudden, her face changed. Her body began to change. I said, sit the way you'd be sitting right now if you felt totally joyous and excited. She goes, well, I don't really know. I said, well, if you did know, show me how you'd sit. So she said, well, I guess, and she began to change her posture, which immediately sent new messages to her brain about how to feel. Your posture, your breathing pattern, your muscular tension or relaxation tells your brain and emotions how to feel. So she changed her posture, her shoulders came up, she began to breathe differently, her facial expression changed, she began to smile, and all of a sudden she felt very happy. I said, are you depressed now? She said, no. She said, but I'll get depressed later. I said, the only way you'll get depressed later is if you run your brain and your body in the way you were a few moments ago. Instead, develop the pattern of moving your body, walking, talking, breathing, having your face look like what it would look like if you were very happy. You will feel that way. For years, I've been teaching that if you want to change how you feel and how you behave, change the way you use your physiology. If, for example, you're depressed, but you put a smile on your face, you will not feel depressed. Just recently, scientists at the University of California have verified this. They have found that people are beating lie detectors by putting themselves in a physiology or a posture and breathing pattern similar to that of when they're telling the truth. As a result, they feel as if what they're saying is true, and they even fool a lie detector. Why not reprogram your own body by changing how you use your body and your thought processes? And what I'd like to do in this tape is show you some specific ways to make those changes. But first, remember, you're already producing results. So if you don't like the result you're getting, emotionally or behaviorally, change how you communicate to yourself. Change either what you're picturing in your mind or what you're hearing or saying to yourself, or change the way you use your body, or both. See, you have all the resources you really need to succeed in your life. The question is, can you get access to them in the appropriate place? I mean, haven't you had a time in your life when you snapped at somebody for no particular reason? It had nothing to do with them. It was just the state you were in. You weren't very resourceful, were you? And haven't you also had times in your life where somebody did something really terrible, but you were really compassionate in your response? It had to do with how your posture was, how your breathing was, how you were picturing things, how you looked at things in that time. You know, for centuries, man's been fascinated by ways to alter his states and thus his experience of life. He's tried fasting, drugs, ritual, music, sex, food, hypnosis, chanting. All these things will have their uses, and they all have their limitations. However, what I want you to do now is just learn how to take direct control. I've said before, your brain is like a biocomputer. All you have to do is punch in the signals of what results you want, and you'll get them. Why not just do it directly? It's all controlling and directing states. Really, I would say the quality of your life is not only the quality of your communication, but it's really based upon your ability to manage states. Maybe your goal should be an effective state manager, because by managing your states, you manage your emotions and thus your behaviors in life. That's why, for example, when we have toddlers, we make sure that they stay rested up, because we know as they get more tired, as their physiology changes, their positive responsiveness to the environment also changes. That's why we make sure they get a nap so they're not cranky. Human beings, as they grow older, some of them still need naps. Some of them still need ways to have more energy so they're not so cranky in their response. But remember, how we represent things, how we use our body, those are the keys. Those are the master tools to directing your brain, your emotion, your behavior, and your life. For example, how do you respond when a loved one arrives home hours late from when you expected them? Well, it depends on how you were representing why they're late. If during the 2 hours that you were waiting for them, you imagine that the reason they were late is they may have been in a car accident, and you imagine them bloody or possibly in a hospital, then when they arrive home, you might greet them with a state of concern. You might give them a big hug and say, "God, how are you?" If instead, while they were late for those 2 hours, you continued to represent to yourself the possibility mentally that the reason they were late is they didn't care about you, or because they were with someone else in a clandestine affair, then I guarantee you'll be in a different state when they arrive home, and you will probably treat them in a way that will cause them to want to have clandestine affairs, because you wouldn't be very pleasant to be around. Also, the other thing that would determine your response is if you were physically run down, you might respond quite differently than if you felt energized and vital and strong and happy. If because of your dietary patterns your blood sugar is low, you're going to respond quite differently than if you have a dietary pattern that allows you to be biochemically healthy. Now, the next obvious question that came up for me was, okay, it's true, it seems, that human beings' behavior is the result of the state they're in. I mean, if I'm physically run down, I'm going to respond quite differently than if I'm physically vibrant and strong. But my question is, how come when people are in the same states, they behave differently? I mean, one person, when they feel loved by you or they love you, will express it by hugging you. Another person may just tell you and not hug you. Why do they behave differently? Well, the difference is they're models of the world. Some people, for example, when they're angry, have one model in their brain of how to respond. Out of a state of anger, their model of responsiveness is to lash out, and that's their only choice. Other people have more elegant choices of how to communicate, how to change how they feel, how to change the way other people behave through their communication skills, and so they behave differently. I remember seeing some pictures of war in the Middle East and over in Cambodia, where I watched at one point on film a 13-year-old boy who went into a state of rage and anger and then picked up a machine gun and blew a bunch of people away. I mean, it was an unbelievably devastating scene. How could a young man do that at the age of 13 years old? Well, one reason is he was in a state of rage. But when you and I are in rage, we don't pick up an Uzi submachine gun and blow someone away. What's the difference? Well, in his environment, in the war-ravaged area of Cambodia, it seems like an appropriate response. He's seen other people do it, so when he's in that state, he behaves that way. This is why it's critical that, one, we manage our states, and that, two, we develop as many choices as possible on how to respond out of states, so that we learn that even if we are angry, what's the most elegant way in which to express that anger where it does not harm ourselves or others, but rather takes us closer to our goals. And this can be done by modeling successful people. So understanding how to direct your states is like understanding how to get the best out of yourself at any moment in time. When we learn how to master our states by directing our internal representations, that is what we picture and say to ourselves, and when we manage our body effectively, we literally learn to master our lives, our emotions, and our behaviors. And we can take things that may seem very difficult and make them very simple. For example, I was recently on an airplane with Ken Blanchard, the author of The 1 Minute Manager. And Ken was writing an article at the time for Golf Digest in which they asked him to go out and work with the best golf instructor in the United States and see if he could distill some of the key elements and make them simple and share them in an article. Well, Ken worked for the man for several days and took a few strokes off his golf game, and he was very excited about that. And he said that there was one challenge, though. And the challenge was, he said, there's so much to remember that when I go up to hit the ball, it's hard to remember it all. And I told him very simply, you don't have to remember it. I said, have you ever hit a golf ball perfectly? He said, well, of course. I said, have you hit a golf ball perfectly more than once? He said, sure. I said, then how to hit a golf ball is already trained. It's already programmed into your nervous system. All you got to do is go back into the same state you were in when you hit a golf ball perfectly, and everything will happen automatically. He said, well, that sounds real good, but I just can't imagine it being that easy. I said, well, it is. Let me show you how. And what I had him do was go back to the times when he hit golf balls perfectly and reassociate to those experiences and get back in the same exact state and then create a triggering device so he could put himself in that state at any moment in time. Well, he got very excited by this. The next day he went out to play golf and he knocked 15 strokes off his golf game. If you don't know that much about golf, that's pretty much unheard of. He shot better than he had in almost 15 years of playing golf, all because he learned how to get in the most effective state. About 2 years ago, Life magazine was doing an article on me and my work, and I made several claims about the work that I'd done and the kind of results I produced with athletes. So one of the writers, who seemed to be a little bit harsh at the time and a bit of a doubting Thomas, which she had a right to be, said, well, let's see you produce the result with somebody right now. I said, well, get me an athlete. So we happened to be at my home at the time, and the Laker game was on, the Los Angeles Lakers. And there was a man named Byron Scott on there. He'd shot 1 of 9 shots that day and scored 3 points. And Chick Hearn, the announcer, was talking about how terrible he'd played. Well, I said, get me him. He'd be a great example. And they did. I went up to Los Angeles the next afternoon, and I worked with Byron Scott, just showing him how to change his state briefly. Nothing very intense, nothing very long. But before I showed him, we let him just shoot free. And he shot around the courts, taking various shots, and he was shooting about 1 out of every 3 shots, effectively. And then I began to work with him. And the way I worked with him is I had him access the parts of his body and his brain, how he represented a shot when he made one. What was he thinking in his brain? What was he picturing unconsciously? What was he saying to himself? What were the quality of his movements like? How was he breathing? I did this with him for about 15 or 20 minutes, at the end of which we showed him how to create this same triggering device so that he could put himself in state consistently. Well, I gave him the basketball, and he made 28 shots in a row from every place on the court. He didn't miss after the 28th shot. His partner began to think, well, this isn't possible. He says, man, I'm telling you, I can't miss. And he went out the very next day, and he shot 8 of 12 shots and scored 22 points and was the second highest scorer in the game. He practiced with us on 3-point shots. And by the way, by the end of the season, he was one of the top 3-point shooters in the entire NBA. Now, I'm not suggesting that I programmed that in and made him the best 3-point shooter, but what I did do is assist him in getting into the state that would allow him to make use of the resources he spent a lifetime developing. I did the same thing with a man named Michael O'Brien, a swimmer. Michael was in the 1984 Olympics in the 1500 freestyle, and he was hoping to win a bronze, maybe a silver medal. But during his practice sessions, he was continuing to sabotage his success. He wasn't going for it full on. He had a certain level of fear. I showed him how to reprogram out the fear and how to access his ideal states on cue. He went out and beat the United States champion by over 6.5 seconds and won the gold. Once again, I couldn't have programmed that in. He spent a lifetime developing the resources, but I showed him how to get access to them. And just as you have developed resources through your lifetime that you may not be accessing now, you can by changing your state, by remembering times when you've been effective, embodying that physiology or posture, breathing pattern, facial expression, and seeing things and saying things to yourself the way you did then, you'll begin to feel similarly and produce the kinds of results that you deserve to produce now in your life. Great leaders and great motivators understand the power of state and how to change it in other people. The ability to change other people's states is a quality that can also change the quality of your life. I mean, haven't you ever walked into a restaurant and had the waiter or waitress walk up to you and say, "What do you want?" and be upset with you, and you haven't even done anything? Well, what's your response? Do you usually say, "Oh, this person's doing the best they can with the resources they have. They're in a poor state, so they're treating me poorly"? It's highly unlikely. Usually we get upset as well. But in our getting upset, it doesn't change anything. We don't get better service. That person's still upset. What if instead you were to say, "Hey, this person is responding out of a poor state. They're not an unresourceful person. They're just in an unresourceful state. And I can change their state and change their behavior." How can one do this? Well, it's simple. Change the way that they're representing who you are. If they walk up and go, "What do you want?" you can go, "Nothing right now. I mean, I can see they're overworking you. Why don't you take your time and help everyone else, and when you have a chance, come on back and take my order." What's that going to do? The person's going to probably look back and go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they're going to reevaluate the state they're in. They're going to say, "I'm sorry, I'm just stressed out because I didn't get any sleep last night," or "I just argued with a cook," or "I've been arguing with my boyfriend and I've been thinking about that," or "the last people didn't leave me a tip," or whatever, something that's affecting their state. And they'll go, "No, I want to take your order." And you go, "No, please help everyone else first, then come back to me." They go, "No, I want to help you." Okay. You can change people's states and have fun doing it. You could change a person's physiology. What if somebody came to you and they were real upset with you and you gave them a hug? Do you ever see your puppy dog? Doesn't your puppy know how to change your state? You start to yell at the puppy and it comes down and it puts its nose at your toes. That changes your physiology, changes your state, changes the way you behave towards it, doesn't it? And to be a leader, you've got to know how to change the states of other people. Dick Tomey is a master of state change. He's the head coach of the University of Hawaii football team. A good example of his skill was used in his game against Wyoming several years ago. By halftime, his team was being beat 22-0. They were being pushed all over the field by Wyoming and didn't even look like they belonged on the same field with them. At halftime, as the men began to walk into the locker room, it was obvious by their bowed shoulders and heads, the expressions on their faces, their physiology alone told you that they weren't going to go back out in the next half and access their greatest skills and win the game. But Tomey had an idea. He decided he'd change the way they were representing what 22-0 meant. And what he did was he pulled out a poster that he had formed. And on it, he had clippings of various newspaper articles about football teams that had come back from incredible margins. 32-0, where a team came back and won, 38-32. 25-point leads, where the team came back and turned it around. Well, the team members began to gather around and read these articles, and pretty soon they began to represent to themselves that they could win, that they could tap their top potential, that they could go out and win the game. The result? In this new state of resourcefulness, the team went out and held Wyoming scoreless in the second half, outscoring them and winning the game 28-22. That's the power of state. Now, let's work on some specific tools on how to change it. We understand the power. We know we can change things, but how do we do that? Well, I said one way to do it is change what you're representing. In NLP terminology, we call that reframing. Reframing simply means changing the person's way of evaluating what something means. It's important for us to remember that no matter what happens in our life, it doesn't have any meaning except the meaning we give it. Now, it's true that many of us are on automatic. Many of us go with what the culture teaches us, that if we try something that doesn't work, it means we failed, and then we feel bad. You don't have to feel bad. You can change it into an opportunity for learning. That would be an example of reframing. If you look at failures as learning experiences, as opportunities, then it immediately changes how you feel about it, the state you're in, and how much of your resourcefulness you can use in the future. Nothing has any power over you except the power you give it through your own conscious thoughts. I mean, for example, what if I were to ask you, what's the meaning of a footstep? You'd probably get a weird look on your face and say, what are you talking about? Well, let's think about it for a minute. If you're walking down a busy street, there's so many footsteps that you don't even hear them. In that situation, they don't have any effective meaning. But what if you're sitting home alone, hearing the steps moving toward you? Do the footsteps have meaning then? They sure do. The same signal, meaning the sound of the footsteps, will have many different meanings depending upon what it has meant to you in similar situations in the past. Your past experience may provide you with a context for that signal, and thus determine whether it relaxes or frightens you. For example, if you hear the sounds of footsteps at a certain time, you might classify that sound as that of your spouse coming home early. People who have experienced burglaries, though, may think it means an intruder. Thus, the meaning of any experience in life depends entirely upon the frame we put around it. If you change your frame of reference, the context in which you perceive something, then the meaning changes instantly. This process is called reframing. And there are basically two ways that you can change a person's frame of reference. You can do what we call content reframing or context reframing. Both alter your internal representations by resolving internal pain or conflict, therefore putting you in a more resourceful state. Context reframing involves taking an experience that seems to be bad, upsetting, or undesirable and showing how that same behavior or experience is actually a great advantage in another context. Children's literature is filled with examples of context reframing. Rudolph's nose, which made people make fun of him, was actually an advantage and made him a hero in the context of a dark and snowy night when Santa was in great need. The ugly duckling suffered great pain because he was so different, but his difference was his beauty as a full-grown swan. Context reframing is invaluable in business. Great innovations are made by those who know how to reframe activities and problems into potential resources in other situations. For example, oil was once considered something that destroyed the value of land for crop usage. Yet look at its value today. Several years ago, lumber yards had difficulties disposing of large amounts of waste sawdust from their mills. One guy took that waste and decided to put it to use in another context. He pressed it together with glue and lighter fluid and created something called Presto logs. After contracting to take away all of this quote-unquote worthless sawdust from these sawmills, he began to market his product. And for 2 years, he had a multi-million-dollar business with his major resource costing him nothing. But really, that's all an entrepreneur is, a reframer, someone who endows resources with new wealth-producing capacity. Content reframing involves taking the exact situation and changing what it means. For example, you might say your son never stops talking. He never shuts up. If you wanted to create a content reframe for this, you might say that he certainly must be a very intelligent young man to have so much to say. There's the story of a famous army general who was known to have reframed his troops during a heavy enemy attack by saying, "We're not retreating, we're just advancing in another direction." When a person close to us dies, most people in our culture are sad. Why? Many reasons. Feelings of loss, for instance. Yet some people are joyous. How come? They reframe death to mean something else. It means to them that the deceased is always with them, that nothing in the universe is ever destroyed, that things just change form. Some consider death to be graduation to a higher level of existence, so they're joyous about it. Another kind of content reframe is to actually change the way you see, hear, or represent a situation drastically. If you're upset about what someone said to you, you may envision yourself smiling as he says the same negative words expressed in the tonality of your favorite singer. Or you may see the same experience where a person upset you in your mind, only this time, as you see them speaking, surround them with your favorite color. Or you may even change what that person said to you in the first place and re-experience it in your mind in this new way. Hear them apologize to you. Or you could see him speaking to you from a perspective that puts you very high above him, looking down on him. Reframing the same stimulus changes the meaning sent to the brain and thus the states and behaviors associated with it. Let's do an example. What I'd like you to do right now is let's do an exercise so we can stop talking about this and applying it. Right now, I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about something that's upsetting you or has upset you, something that's frustrated you or angered you or upset you in some way. It doesn't have to be a major one. And what I'd like you to do is just go to the end of that experience as if it was a movie and run through it so you get to the end of it. And what I want you to do is sit up nice and straight, or stand up if you will, if you can. Breathe fully, and I want you to act as if you're the most devious young child on the planet and you're about to do something really fun, silly, and sinister. And what I want you to do is I want you, when I say now, to immediately start running that same experience backwards, like a movie, and seeing everything happening in reverse at incredible speed. And while you do this, I want you to change it so if there are people involved with this situation, you change the color around them, their facial expressions, maybe the size of their nose, maybe they shrink down, maybe they grow. We're going to do a content reframe. So what I want you to do is just begin with me right now. Close your eyes and go back to the end of that situation, the thing that was bugging you, and right now start running it backwards very, very rapidly and keep running it backwards. See things change. See the person's eyes getting really big, then shrinking down. See their nose getting long. See their ears getting bigger. Hear the sounds M-I-C-K-E-Y. Listen to the sounds of a circus as it's all happening. Here, faster, faster. Change it, change the color, change the size. Have them apologize, have them shrink down, have them grow up. Talk to them, tell them, listen. Change different aspects of it continuously, move it at fast speeds, and bring it all the way back to the very beginning. Then run it forwards at incredibly fast speeds and change even more. Change the color, change the shape, change the size, change their tone of voice so they sound like Mickey Mouse. They're going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. Run it all the way through. Have fun. Smile. Do it all the way through the end. Then run it backwards again at a different speed, even more rapidly. all the way through. Run it back and forwards. Keep changing it. And after you've done that a few times, then stop and run it through forward. And notice what you see now when you think of the situation, and notice how you feel. If you've done this effectively, as I'm sure you have, you're probably either laughing, smiling, or you at least have neutral feelings about something that used to bother you. What have we done? We've changed the way you represent that situation to your brain, and thus the way you feel about the situation. Now you are at a level of choice instead of in reaction. It doesn't take a lot of time to change how we feel about things. A lot of people try and teach us that in order to create change, we have to go back and re-experience all our stuff and let go of it, because otherwise it builds up inside till it explodes. That's not an accurate model or metaphor for how the human nervous system works. A better metaphor might be that your mind and body are a lot like a jukebox, and the experiences of your life are like discs. And what happens is life comes along, and certain things, when you remember them, it's like pushing a button. And when you push that button, some buttons will push sad songs. Others push happy songs. So what do you want to do in life? Well, one option is to try and only push the buttons that play happy songs. But that's not always easy, because there are other people that come by and want to play with your jukebox and push some of your buttons. So you have another option. You can reprogram the buttons. So now when you push the button that used to play a sad song, when it goes to play it, you've changed the disc. You've re-recorded over it a new movie in your mind, as you just did. So now when that situation happens and the button is pushed, you can just smile, or you can just feel neutral about it instead of being in reaction. You wouldn't be concerned that if a person didn't listen to all the discs in their jukebox, that the jukebox would explode and overflow onto everyone else. Because you know you don't have to play all the discs. You can re-record them or you can replace them. Your brain is very similar. You can take any experience and re-record over it. You can change your mental movies, change the way you feel from this day forward, and you can do it in moments about just about anything.
Exercises that ask you to close your eyes and use visualization techniques. You may want to wait to listen to this side until you're not driving, so you can relax completely and get full benefit from this tape.
There was a touching and powerful article in the Baltimore Sun newspaper that was published not long ago. It was about a young boy named Calvin Stanley. It seems Calvin rides a bike, plays baseball, goes to school, and does just about everything else that 11-year-olds do, except see. How could this little boy do all these things while many people in the same situation just give up on life or live in sorrow? As I read the article, it became clear that Calvin's mother is a master reframer. She has turned every experience that Calvin has, experiences that others would have classified as limitations, into advantages in Calvin's mind. Since that's what he represents to himself, that's what Calvin experiences. Here's some examples out of the article of how his mother communicates to him. Quote, Calvin's mother remembers the day her son asked why he was blind. I explained he was born that way and that it was nobody's fault. He asked, why me? I said, I don't know why, Calvin. Maybe there's a special plan for you. Then she sat her son down and told him, you are seeing, Calvin. You're just using your hands instead of your eyes. And remember, there's nothing you can't do. One day, Calvin was very sad because he realized he'd never see his mother's face. But Mrs. Stanley knew what to tell her child. The article continued. I said, Calvin, you can see my face. You can see it with your hands and by listening to my voice. And you can tell more about me that way than somebody who can use his eyes, unquote. The article went on to say that Calvin moves in the sighted world with the trust and faith and the unshakable confidence of a child whose mother has always been there. Calvin wants to become a computer programmer and someday design programs for the blind. You know, the world is full of Calvins. We need more people who use reframing as effectively as Mrs. Stanley did. I had the good fortune of recently meeting another master reframer. His name is Commander Jerry Coffey. He's an incredible man who used reframing to keep his sanity while he spent 7 years in solitary confinement in a POW camp in Vietnam. Our first reaction to hearing this is probably to wince a bit. However, nothing is good or bad except what thinking makes it so, as Shakespeare pointed out. And Jerry decided to represent to himself that this was a great opportunity to learn more about himself than ever before, a chance to become closer to God, something that someday would make him proud of the way he handled himself. With that frame of reference, he saw everything that happened as part of a personal development experience, and he came out totally and positively transformed 7 years later. He wouldn't give up the experience for $1 million, he says. Think of a major mistake that you've made in the last year. You might feel an instant rush of gloom, but chances are the mistake was part of an experience with more success than failures. And as you consider it, you'll probably begin to realize that you learned more from that mistake than from anything else you did that month. So you can zero in on what you did wrong, or you can reframe the experience in a way that focuses beyond it to what you've learned. There are multiple meanings to any experience. The meaning in life is whatever you choose to emphasize, just as its content is what you choose to focus on. One of the keys to success, then, is finding the most useful frame for any experience so you can turn it into something that works for you rather than against you. The one thing I cannot stress enough is that you're in control. You run your brain. You produce the results of your life. Reframing is one of the most powerful ways you can change the way you think about an experience. You already put frames on experience, so now it's time to do it consciously to make sure they empower you rather than limit you. Take a moment and reframe these situations. Someone comes to you and says, "My boss yells at me all the time." How would you reframe that response? What could you say? Well, you might say, "It's great that he cares enough about you to tell you how he really feels. He could have just fired you." That changes the response, doesn't it? "I had to pay $4,000 more in income tax this year." A reframe to that might be, "That's great. You must have made a lot more money this year than last year." Somebody says, "We have little or no extra money to buy Christmas presents this year." Great. Then you can become much more ingenious and make something people will never forget instead of buying that run-of-the-mill gifts that you used to get. Someone says, "Every time I begin to succeed in a big way, I sabotage my success." It's great that you're now aware of that pattern. So with that awareness, you can now change things. Reframing is happening all the time. It's part of advertising. Isn't that what Coca-Cola and Pepsi are constantly fighting over? Who can control the frame? The Pepsi challenge versus Coke is it? Ronald Reagan is probably one of the greatest reframers of all time. One of the best examples of his reframing ability came in the second presidential debate against Walter Mondale. In the first debate, Reagan's age had become an issue for the first time in a campaign. Of course, that was a reframe too. People already knew how old he was, but his stumbling performance and the press coverage of it reframed his age from a simple fact to a potential liability. In the second debate, Mondale made comments that again implied Reagan's age was a liability. People waited for Reagan's rebuttal. In his best aw shucks tone, he said, he didn't think age should be an issue in the campaign. He said he had no intention of making an issue of his opponent's youth and inexperience. In one sentence, he completely reframed the question in a way that guaranteed it'd no longer be a major factor in the race. Remember, every human emotion has its place. It can be reframed. So use reframes so that you continually perceive the world in a way that empowers you. Now, how else can we change how we feel? How else can we run our brains? Well, we've talked about changing what we picture in our minds, what we say to ourselves, but also we can change how we picture things and how we say things to ourselves. In other words, as we've already stated, how we picture things in our mind makes a difference. Let me give you an experience so you can feel the difference in your body. Close your eyes for a moment, and what I'd like you to do is, again, think of something else. Think of something that's been bothering you, making you frustrated or feel limited or upset. And what I want you to do is, as you see this in your mind, is just answer a few questions for me. And just answer them in your own thought processes. Notice, is this thing that's bothering you, if you make it into a picture, is it a movie, like a motion picture, or is it a still frame? Is it in color, or is it in black and white? Is it focused, or is it defocused? Does it have a frame around the picture, or does it seem to go on forever, like a panorama? Is it bright, or is it dim or dark? Is it close to you, or is it far away? Is it life-size or bigger than life? Are you in the picture right there, associated and experiencing it? Or are you seeing yourself in the picture over there? Do you hear certain sounds when you think of the situation that bothers you? Do you hear a certain tone of voice that affects you especially negatively? Are you saying anything to yourself in your own thoughts as you remember the situation? What kind of sensations do you feel in your body? Do you have heavy feelings or light feelings? Warm feelings or cold feelings? Tense muscles or relaxed muscles? Where do you feel muscle tension if you feel it? Upper part of your body, an arm, a leg, where specifically? And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to make some changes in how, not what, but how you're representing this experience in your mind. And I want you to note what it does to your emotion or your state. What I'd like you to do is take this picture that you're imagining in your mind of this thing that bothers you and bring it closer to you. Now notice, does that make the negative feeling more intense? For many people it does. Make it bigger. Make it brighter. And again, notice what that does to your emotional state. For most people, when you make things bigger and brighter and bring them closer, it intensifies them and makes them more negative. Now, step into the experience so you feel it. Make the sound sound even more shrill. Change it so it becomes more intense. Feel more tension in your body. Feel more heaviness. Feel the sensations growing around your body. Now, does it feel much more negative than it did before? Great, so now you know how to depress yourself. You say, well, thanks a lot. I just want to show you what you already do in order to get depressed. These are the things you do unconsciously. Now you're aware of them consciously. Since you're aware of them, we can also change them. So let's change it. Take this picture of this thing that's bothered you and push it far away out in front of you. Push it further away so it's way out there. And then notice, have your feelings not dropped in their negative intensity? Have they not become much more neutral than they were a few moments ago? By changing the proximity of your representations, you immediately change how you feel as well. It lessens the intensity as it gets further away. Now, take that picture and make it black and white, and make it a still frame. And as you do this, notice again if the state changes and becomes more neutral or less intense than it was before. Next, take this picture and shrink it way down and make it defocused. So now you have this little dinky defocused little thing way out there. And notice your feelings are quite different than they were before, aren't they? Now, take that picture that's way out there and change the sounds. So now you hear the sounds coming out in a different way. Now the sounds have more of a rhythm to them. Make the feelings out there, way over there, feel really light and gentle and relaxed. And then take that picture and push it into the sun. Just imagine it going in the sun and watch what happens as soon as it hits the sun. And notice how you feel now. Think about the situation now. And I think what you'll find is you either have neutral feelings, maybe even some positive feelings, but at least neutral feelings about this thing that was bothering you. And then open your eyes. Now, what have we done? All we've done is changed how you've been representing these things to yourself. Not the what. You were seeing the same things. We didn't change the content, just how you were doing it. We call this changing submodalities. Now, submodality sounds like a complicated word, but it's actually very simple. You have 5 senses that you experience the world through. You see, you hear, you taste, you touch, and you smell. Those 5 senses are also known as your 5 modalities, or 5 modes of experiencing the world. So a submodality is a subset, or a more specific description of how you see things, or how you hear things, or how you feel things, etc. If the major set in an example like this was cars, then a subset might be Mercedes. If the major set in human experience is visual, then a subset might be brightness, or size, or shape. So what's the impact when we change submodalities? Well, the impact is quite profound, as I'm sure you experienced. Why? Well, think about it. Haven't you had people say to you before, oh, you're blowing things out of proportion? They're describing probably exactly what's going on in your brain. Because when you make things larger, it intensifies your feeling about them. If they're negative, it intensifies the negative feeling. If it's a great picture, it intensifies the feelings that are positive about that picture. Have you ever had a situation where a job seemed to be so big that you didn't even know where to start? Most of us have. You want to know how to change it? Just stop for a moment, close your eyes, and imagine the project. And then shrink it way down into size where you can imagine the whole project, you doing it, and seeing that picture of that happening in your right hand. All of a sudden, you'll find that by making it smaller, it seems much less intimidating. All of a sudden, you feel differently. And because you feel differently, you'll be in a better state. And when you're in a better state, you'll get access to the part of you that does know how to handle the situation. You won't be overwhelmed. You'll be able to handle it. Now, I know this sounds like a simplification, but it's exactly what happens in your brain. If you've ever had a project and somehow turned yourself around to go do it, the way you did it unconsciously probably was by shrinking it in your unconscious mind. Now you have the ability to do it right away and not have to wait till somehow you manage to change things. You can change them right now and you can do it directly. Have you ever heard somebody say, I just need to get some distance from my problems? Well, guess what? You don't have to go far away. Just take your problems and push them far away. Push them way out there and notice immediately you have a different emotional state. You want to know why some people are unhappy all the time? It's real simple. They take all the positive experiences of their life and they store them far away or oftentimes behind them. Let's try something else. What I'd like you to do is close your eyes and I want you to think of something that's happened in the last few days or the last week. anything at all that you have some feelings about. Just think of anything at all that you want, some experience that's happened in the last week or so. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take that experience and first of all, notice where it's located. Is it in front of you? Is it above you? Is it below you? To the right? To the left? Where is it located? Is it behind you? And what I want you to do is I want you to notice how recent it feels like that happened. And it should feel fairly recent, I would imagine. Now take this experience, this picture, these sounds, these feelings, and I want you to just imagine putting them behind your back and then pushing them behind you further and further and further until the picture goes like 2 or 3 miles behind you where you can't see it, where it's dark and small and it's a little tiny thing way, way, way behind you. Now, as it's way back there, think about it being way back there and think about how recent does it feel now? Does it feel like it happened last week or quite a long time ago? Let's try something else. Bring that experience back where it was. Bring it from way back there and put it back where it was. If it was a positive experience. If it's a negative experience, you might want to put it behind you. Haven't you heard people say things like, oh, God, he's so great, he just puts all the problems behind him. People who succeed do put their problems behind them, literally. And they bring the things they're excited about them and they keep them in front of them. So in their mind, they're stored mentally in front of them, constantly enticing them to go for more, to become more, to do more. Now let's try something else. Think of a pleasant memory that you had from your childhood, any memory at all. And what I'd like you to do is notice as you think about it way back then, how recent does it feel like it happened? Next, take that image or that experience and bring it forward till it's very, very close and it's very big and very bright. Make it big, bright, and close right in front of you. Bring it even closer. Now how recent does it feel? If you just judge by your emotions and not your intellect, does it not feel like it happened much more recently? Would you like to know how some people remain unhappy most of their life while other people remain very happy? It's very simple. People who are unhappy often take the most positive experiences of their life and they put them behind them and push them back and make them small and dark. People who are very happy tend to take their happy experiences and keep them right in front of them and put the negative experiences behind them. People who are unhappy have a strategy for doing so. They take the great happy experiences of their life and they make them small so they don't feel very positive, they don't feel very happy. They often put these positive experiences behind themselves and store them far back away so they don't feel very recent. Oftentimes when you talk to an unhappy person, you say, well, God, you've had all these great things happen to you in the last couple of weeks. And they go, no, I just don't feel that way. They don't feel that way because of the way they represent their positive experiences. They represent them in a way that's impotent. What people who are unhappy do with their negative experiences is they often enlarge them, make them bright, make them focused, make them clear. They often associate to them. They often store them right in front of themselves. So they're constantly near, making them feel bad while the positive experiences are far away. I know a man named W. Mitchell who lives in Denver, Colorado. He's a very, very special man.
About 12 years ago, had an interesting experience. He was riding a motorcycle 65 miles an hour down the highway in San Francisco. Something caught his attention on the side of the road. He glanced over to see what it was while he was driving, turned back what seemed like a split second later, but it actually passes about 5 or 10 seconds. When he looked up, a Mack truck had stopped right in front of him. He was heading into the back of it 65 miles an hour. In an effort to save his life, he threw his motorcycle down at the last second and skidded on the ground underneath this truck at 65 miles an hour. Now that's bad enough, only something worse happened. The gas cap on his motorcycle popped off. Fuel spilled out all over the place. The friction ignited it. Boom! Instantly, fire. 3/4 of his body burned off. His entire face melted. His fingers burned off. He wakes up in a hospital bed in searing pain. Unbelievable pain. I mean, he's fearing to breathe, fearing to move. He comes back from this experience because he has mastered his what with himself? Mastered his communication with himself. Somehow he gets himself through this experience and literally goes back to work in the business community. He starts a business and becomes a millionaire within 2 years. A millionaire from nothing, from scratch. He got $100,000 in the accident, used it to start a business. Guess what the business was? A wood-burning stove company. Yes, it's a fact. He decided that was his way of conquering his fear and became one of the most successful wood-burning stove companies in the entire United States, sold out of Vermont. Now, 3 years later, he has another experience. He has an airplane accident and becomes paralyzed from the waist down for life. Now, according to his wife, he's fried and crippled. And of course, she doesn't want to be around a fried cripple, so she leaves him. Right? You thought you had problems. Now, here's this man who now, after weeks and weeks of working at this and developing his body, comes back to now he has to face his life. He's grotesquely burned. People don't even want to look at him. It's hard to even look at him. He's so grotesque looking. They cut off his toes and they sew them on his hands so he has something to manipulate with, right? And here's this man is now beginning his life again, right? I mean, his life makes most of our worst tragedies look like a comedy, doesn't it? And guess what? He's totally joyous. Because you know what? He understands that it's not what happens, it's what you do. He said, okay, this is what's happened. I can keep worrying and feeling bad about what happened, or I can decide what I'm going to do with my life. And he decided he was going to do something that was going to make a difference. And he decided that there were a lot of issues in the community of Colorado that he thought were important that were not being addressed. So he decided to become a politician. He ran for Congress 2 years ago and came very close to winning. He won the internal game, he didn't quite win the external game. He is now this year running for lieutenant governor of Colorado, and he seems to be the favored candidate for the Democratic Party. Not bad. Arguing the issues intensely. Great communicator. In fact, one of his logos, and one of the things that he has on all of his buttons it says, send me to the governor's mansion, and he said, I won't just be another pretty face. See, he's mastered his communication himself. He knows it's not what happens, it's what you do. Julio Iglesias. How many of you have heard of him? No kidding. You know why you've heard of him? Because his music is played every 30 seconds somewhere in the world. Not bad. One of the greatest selling artists in the history of the world. Did that happen because this man had such great ability, such great talent? He grew up young with this tremendous singing voice, right? And that, suave look, right, that knocks women over and all that kind of stuff. Is that what happened? No way. At the age of 20, he wanted to be either a soccer player or an attorney. And he had a car accident where they thought for sure he'd die. Not only did he survive, but then they told him he'd never walk again. He didn't believe that either, fortunately, and he kept working at it. He lived for 1 year in the hospital. While he was there, a nurse gave him a guitar, and he began to try singing and playing with his voice and working on himself. That's how his career got started. In high school, they wouldn't even let him in the choir. He didn't even want to be there except his girlfriend was in that class, and he figured he'd get next to her and be with her more. He had no interest in singing. All of a sudden, boom, transformed the greatest singer, one of the greatest singers in the history of the world. All because he realized it's what? It's what you what? It's what you do that makes a difference.
We can direct our own states now by changing the way we represent things, and we can take positive things and make them even better. We don't just have to change problems, that's easy. Let's do some good things. Close your eyes. Let's try another exercise. Think of something that creates for you feelings of ecstasy, feelings of joy, something that creates powerful positive feelings, and make a picture of that in your mind. And by the way, if you think you have difficulty making pictures, just feel the feelings you have when you feel joy and ecstasy. Hear what you say to yourself, and then gradually you may begin to have pictures appear as well. But just imagine and notice this feeling that creates feelings of ecstasy. Is it a movie or is it a still frame? Is it life-size or smaller? Is it in color or black and white? Is it focused or defocused? Is it bright, dim, or dark? Is there a frame around it, or is it a panorama that goes on forever? Are you in the picture experiencing it, or are you watching it from over there? Is it close to you or far away? What sounds do you hear? Is your own voice involved? What's the tone of the voices you hear that creates these positive feelings of joy and ecstasy? What are the sensations in your body? Do you feel light or heavy? Do you feel tension or relaxation? And if you do feel tension, where do you feel the tension? See, just by changing your submodality of tension, you can immediately change your state. Notice all the sensations. And now let's try something. Let's make this even better. Take this experience and bring it closer. For most people in the culture, and everyone's a little bit different, this intensifies the positive feeling. Bring it even closer. Try this one. Make it bigger. Even bigger. And notice what the impact of making it bigger is. Try this one. Make it brighter. Turn the brightness knob up. Make it much brighter. Notice how it feels. Brighter and brighter. Make sure you're in the experience. Make sure it's in color and there's movement. Make the sounds even more positive. Enhance them in every way you can. Enhance the sensations in your body as well. And as you do this, notice you do feel even better now than when you first thought about it. You can take any experience in your life and add juice to it, add joy to it by enhancing the way you represent it. So you don't have to just change problems. You can take things that make you feel good and make them turn into ecstasy. You have the ability to run your own brain. You can do things directly to change how you feel. And you don't have to rely on drugs or food or alcohol. If you want to, that's your business, but this is a more direct and precise way, and there are no side effects. Let's try another exercise. How do you feel when somebody says you got a bright future? Feels pretty good, doesn't it? Just try something. Imagine your future right now. Just get a picture in your mind about your future. Something that represents to you what your future might be like. And notice how you feel about it. And then just try one thing. Turn the brightness up. Make it brighter and brighter and brighter. Come on, try it again. Brighter. And notice how you feel about your future. Is it more attractive? Does it draw you more? Now, let's try the opposite. Look at that same picture and make it dark and black and whitish. Make it darker and darker and black and white. For most people, their future doesn't feel as attractive now. So turn it back up again. Put the brightness back up. Put the brightness in your future. And notice, you do feel like you have a bright future now, don't you? You quite literally can control how you feel. And by the way, if you feel like your future is bright, you're willing to do things today to make it even better. When people feel like it's not so bright, they feel like, why even try? Now, it's important to note that of all the questions that I've asked you about submodalities, most people have a couple that affect them most, because we're all different. For some people, making things darker will intensify it, rather than making it brighter. So just pay attention to the effect. Also, for some people, bringing something closer doesn't make a big difference, but if you make it brighter, it makes a huge difference. For some people, it's not what they see that makes a difference, but how they change the quality of the tone of voice. For example, do you have one of those internal dialogues that sometimes says to you, you can't do this? Do you ever have one of those things that stops you right before you go for it? Well, let me show you a way to handle it. Rather than trying to shut the voice down, just change the volume of the voice. So now instead of it saying, you can't do this, it now says, you can't do this. It changes how you feel instantly, doesn't it? And out of that kind of voice tone, you might laugh or change the approach. You might change that same voice so it's just as loud, but it has a sexual tone of voice. So now it says, you can't do that. For a lot of people, when they hear that tone of voice, they feel like really doing it. It's all up to you to make the changes and to find out what impacts you most. But once you discover it, you can find anything that upsets you. And if you discover, for example, that changing brightness is the biggest difference for you, you can just brighten it up. Instantly you'll feel differently. Instantly you'll behave differently. This is the power of mind mastery. This is the power of knowing how to run your brain. This is the beginning of your owner's manual for directing that brain to produce the results that you want right now. This is going beyond positive thinking to precise direction of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Various emotional states are impacted by the way we use our submodalities. Like, for example, let's take a look at love. Love for most of us is a wonderful, ethereal, almost mystical experience. It's also important from a modeling point of view to note that love is a state, and like all states, all results, it's produced by specific sets of actions or stimuli when they're perceived and represented in certain ways. How do you fall in love? Well, one of the most important perceptual ingredients of falling into love is associating with all the things you love about someone and disassociating from the things you don't love. Falling in love is such a heady, disorienting feeling for so many people because it's not a balanced one. You're not making a balance sheet of a person's good and bad qualities and running it through a computer and seeing what comes out. You're totally associating to a few elements of another person that you find intoxicating. You're never even aware, at least in that moment, of the person's faults. So what ruins relationships? Well, there are, of course, many factors. One may be that you no longer associate with the things that attracted you to that person in the first place. In fact, you may have gone so far as to associate with all the unpleasant experiences you've had with them and disassociate from the pleasant ones you've shared. How does this happen? A person may have noticed and made big pictures of his mate's habit of leaving the cap off the toothpaste or strewing her stuff on the floor. Maybe he no longer writes her love notes and she associates to that fact. Or possibly she remembers what he said to her in the heat of an argument, and she listens to that dialogue play over and over in her head, re-experiencing how she felt. She doesn't remember the gentle way he touched her that day, or the special things that he said the previous week, or what he did for her on their anniversary. The examples can go on and on. Bear in mind, there's nothing wrong with doing this. Just be clear that this pattern of representation will probably not empower your relationship. What if in the middle of an argument you remember the first time you kissed or held hands? A time when your lover did something really special for you, and then you made that picture big and close and bright again. From that state, how will you treat this person that you love? So the point here is it's critical that we look at our patterns of communication and ask ourselves regularly, if I continue to represent things to myself this way, What will likely be the final result in my life? What direction is my present behavior taking me? And is that really where I want to go? Right now is the time to examine what your mental and physical actions are creating for you. You don't want to find out later that something you could simply and easily have changed led you down a path to a place you didn't want to be. In addition, it might be really valuable for you to note if you have a particular pattern of using association and disassociation. There are many people who spend most of their time disassociated from most of their representations. They seldom seem to be emotionally moved by anything. Disassociation has its advantages. I mean, if you keep out of deep emotions about some things, you have more resources in handling them. However, if this is your consistent pattern for representing most of your experiences in your life, then you're really missing what I like to call the juice of life. A tremendous amount of joy. I've counseled conservative people who were limited in expressing what they felt about their lives, and I've helped them to set up new perceptual patterns. By greatly increasing their associated internal representations, they've come alive and found life to be a whole new experience. On the other hand, if all or the vast majority of your representations are fully associated, you might find yourself to be an emotional misfit. If you develop this strategy, you might find great difficulty in coping with life because you feel every little thing, and life isn't always fun or easy or exciting. A person who is fully associated with everything in life is extremely vulnerable and will usually take things too personally. The key to life is a balance in all things, including the perceptual filters of association and disassociation. We can associate and disassociate from anything we want. The key is to associate consciously, so it helps us. We can control any representation we make in our brain. Remember, when you change the way you represent something to yourself, you instantly change the choices available in your mind and in your body. Think of the power that you have from this day forward by knowing that you are not at the effect of anything. You can change how you feel and how you behave about anything by changing either what you're representing, what it means, or how you're representing it to yourself, or how you're using your body. Because your body, of course, is the filter that will tell you how to feel. See, if you try and look at the advantage of something and see it as a benefit in another situation, but you're sitting with your shoulders collapsed, your head down, you're breathing shallow, it's highly unlikely that you're going to feel congruent or certain that there really is a benefit in the situation. But if you will command both the use of your body so that you move it and use it in positive ways, while you change the meaning in what you represent, you can change any aspect of your life. If W. Mitchell can change what life means to him, then you can change what it means to you. And to be an effective business person, you've got to be a master reframer. To be an effective leader, of course, you must be a master reframer. There's a famous story about Tom Watson, the founder of IBM. One of his subordinates had made a horrendous mistake that cost the company $10 million. And he was called into Watson's office and he said, "I suppose you want my resignation." Watson looked at him and said, "Are you kidding? We just spent $10 million educating you." There's a valuable lesson in everything that happens in life. The best leaders are the ones who learn the lesson and put the most empowering frame on outside events. This works for politics, business, teaching, and your home life as well. Be a leader by directing your mind now. One final thing about controlling our states. Physiology is our fastest way of changing our states. It is even more powerful and quicker than changing what or how we represent things. This is why it's so powerful to take care of your body, to get on a good exercise regimen that does not stress you but empowers you physiologically. When we feel good physically, it affects the way we perceive the world. The same challenges don't seem to be so tough anymore because the vehicle we need to make it through life with is taken care of and feels strong. Even though I've spent more time in this tape talking about how to change our representations, that's only because the descriptions of those takes longer. What's equally important, if not more important, is how you use your body. Diet is critically important. If you're ingesting foods that cause your body to work overtime and drain your nervous system of energy, then you're robbing yourself of a great deal of the resources that could change the quality of your life. If you're taking in high levels of sugar or if you're smoking, then you're robbing your body of oxygen and you're changing your biochemistry in ways that are definitely going to alter your moods. After all, that's the only reason people use drugs, is to alter their states. So why use food as a drug when you can do it directly without having the side effect of excess pounds or a hangover the next morning? In addition, the critical key is to make sure your body and mind are working together and not fighting each other. If in your mind you're representing you can do something, but your body doesn't match that, then you're incongruent and that'll cost you. So it's critical to notice the difference between being congruent about something and being incongruent. I'm sure there have been times when you've talked to someone and you left the meeting and they said they'd do something, but you didn't believe that they would. And the reason was because your unconscious mind probably noticed some incongruency. It probably noticed that the person was shaking their head no while they said, sure, we'll get it done. This happens more often than you can realize. Or someone says, I really love you, while they shake their head no. That's called incongruence. The body is saying one thing and the mouth is saying another. Power comes when you align your body and mind in the same direction. So make sure while you're reframing your thoughts, you also reframe your body and make sure that you're moving with the quality you desire to change. And once again, remember, you can change how you feel by changing the way you walk and move, and that'll help you to change the way you represent things quicker and easier than if you just try and change the picture. Posture and breathing pattern are number one for changing state. Changing what you perceive and how you perceive it are number two. And there are many models available to you. If you want to have some fun sometime, get a videotape of somebody like Bruce Springsteen and start modeling or mirroring the way he uses his body. Use the same kind of gestures, use the same kind of tone of voice, the same kind of facial expression. I think you'll discover something really exciting. Get a tape of Martin Luther King and try and speak with the same tonality. When you do this, you'll begin to send the exact same messages to your brain as they send to theirs through their own physiology. It's quite a profound and enjoyable experience, and it'll give you new choices of how to use your body to produce peak experiences in your life. And finally, take care of your physical health. That includes exercise and that includes diet. So now you have the fundamental tools to run your brain, to direct your internal computer to produce any result you want. You can now choose ecstasy, love, desire, confidence, or any other emotion you want any moment in time. The power and the tools are at your fingertips. The buttons are your physiology and the way you represent things to yourself. So once you know how to do things, the question is, will you use these tools? And what will cause you to use them is if you have a compelling enough future. So let's take a look at how to create a future that's real. In modeling some of the most successful people around the world, one thing stands out very clearly. They all have a compelling future, something that is driving them forward to use their resources in the present moment, today, for something that they want to generate not only today, but even something bigger in the future. Compelling futures are the key to using the resources that you really have. When we talk about personal power, we can't separate the ability to take action from a reason to take actions in the first place. I've always been fascinated by people who I know have the skills to change their life, even people who've learned NLP, who understand how to change their thoughts, who understand how to change their feelings. They know how to make things better, and they know how to take things that are limiting them and change them. But most of them don't. Most of them do not use their skills. Why? When I looked at that and I looked at my own life and I thought, I am using these, I am making a difference. What's the difference between us? And I think the difference is a compelling future, a reason to do what you know you can do with your life, a purpose. It's one thing to know how to change your life, and that's the first step to creating change. The second key, once you know how, is to have a reason to do so. You've got to have a why, a goal, a passion that is big enough to drive you to use your resources when you need them. Recently, a man came to interview me from a national financial magazine, and the purpose of his article was to document what it was that allowed certain people at a young age to develop financial independence. And in his interview with me, I shared with him the importance of simply modeling people who are successful financially. I told him that in order to succeed financially, one needs merely find someone who's successful, find out what they're doing, and do the exact same things. He said, well, that sounds really great and real easy for you, and all the people I've interviewed like you say it's easy. I say, well, it's not easy, but it is simple. He said, well, that may be simple for you, but it isn't for the rest of us. You're just gifted. You're just lucky. I said, sir, I'm not gifted. I'm not lucky. He said, but look how motivated you are in your life. You're passionate about making things happen. He said, I just don't have that gift, and I don't think the average person does either. I said the difference between me and other people, the reason I've used all of my resources to produce not only financial gain, but emotional, social, spiritual gain for both myself and other people is because I've got a reason to do it. I'm driven. I've constantly and consistently set goals for my life. And I told him that goal setting to me is the most important tool that you have. It is the reason to use all that you are. It gives purpose to all human activity. And human beings are goal-seeking individuals. When we aren't seeking a goal, when we aren't making progress in the direction of something we desire, we begin to stagnate. And we're all either growing or dying. There's no in between. Besides, the purpose of goals is not to achieve them. The purpose of the goals is in pursuit of a goal, we become even more than we were. And when the bee chases after the nectar in a flower, it doesn't realize that the processional effect is that it pollinates the flowers and allows them to multiply. I think the same thing is true with human beings. Oftentimes we have a goal to develop ourselves in business or to develop our economics. While we're going for that building of the business, there's the processional effect of jobs that we create, the processional effect of new possibilities in people's thinking, the processional effects of things we aren't even aware of yet. So goals are really, in my mind, what makes the world go round. They give us the reasons, they give us the purpose to take consistent action. Without them, people are listless and the quality of a person's emotional life begins to deteriorate. When people have no goals, no direction, when there's nothing they're working for, oftentimes they feel down or depressed, and then they begin to try and change those emotions by overeating or doing something else to make momentary change. The only way that life changes long-term is by having long-term goals. There was a phenomenal study done in 1953 at Yale University where researchers interviewed the graduating members of the class and asked them about their goals, asked them if they had a set of written goals for their life with a plan for their achievement. Less than 3% of the graduates of that year had such a goal list or such a plan. An interesting follow-up was done to the study in 1973, almost 20 years later, and the researchers discovered many unique things about this class. They noticed that the group that had goals seemed to be better adjusted emotionally, socially, and in their families. They've also found a measurable difference in economics. 20 years later, the 3% that had written goals when they left the university were worth more in financial terms than all 97% of the class members combined. This is the measurable difference in setting goals and creating directions. So how do we explain there being this much of a difference just because someone has something they're going for? When you make it clear to your mind what it is you want through goal setting, what it does is activate your internal success system, which causes you to take everything that you see, hear, and do in life and become much more aware of how it relates to your purpose. In fact, when you experience goals in advance in enough detail, you literally program them into your nervous system and make them possible. Let me give you an example, something you can try right now in your experience to notice how, by experiencing the goals you want in advance in your mind, you actually begin to make them a reality. Try the following things. Stand up, if you will, if you're not already. Put your feet so they're pointed straight in front of you. Put your right hand pointing straight ahead with one finger pointing straight in front of you. And what I'd like you to do is just gradually begin to turn to the right without turning your legs, without turning your feet, that is. Keep turning until you comfortably stop behind you. And notice where your finger is pointing on the wall. Don't hurt yourself, don't stretch, just go to where it's comfortable. And then come back around. Now, let's create some goals and experience them as being real. Close your eyes, and in your mind, I want you to pretend as if and feel as if your finger is pointing in front of you, and feel yourself turning without actually doing it, just imagining it in your mind, until you go much further than you stopped the first time. Go ahead and try that. Just imagine your finger pointing out, and feel as if you're turning, and you turn easily, and you turn much further than you did the first time. And feel how much further you go. Now, open your eyes. Put your finger in front of you, and now do it for real. See how far you go this time. Go ahead and turn all the way comfortably as far as you can. I think you'll notice, much to your surprise maybe, that you can go a good 25 to 50% farther after you've traced the same experience in your mind in advance. You've literally programmed your nervous system. The same thing happens when you start to take goals and make them real. My life changed not only when I learned how to direct my nervous system, but when I gave myself reasons to do so, when I gave myself something I could get passionate about that would drive me. 3 years ago, when things were not going well, the place I started when I got disgusted with where I was in my life was goal setting. What I did is I sat down and I went through a process that I'll share with you, a process of asking myself questions and making distinctions until I had a clear-cut game plan for what I wanted to accomplish in my life. First, let's go through a couple key fundamentals about goals that are really critical to know. Some people say the key to getting whatever you want is real simple.
How to get whatever you want. Right there at the top of your notes, and as soon as you've got it written down, look up and assume the physiology where you can write very, very rapidly. I've got a lot to give you here. I don't want you to miss any of it. How to get whatever you want. Here we go. Ask. End of notes. In fact, the formula is pretty powerful. It says, ask and you shall receive. Yeah, with a formula like that, you think more people would look into it. How many of you believe the formula works? Let me see a show of hands. All of you, great. How many of you have all that you want? So what's the problem? Failure to what? Ask. Failure to ask. So some people, wait a second, I've been asking and I'm still not receiving. Well, maybe you're not asking intelligently. I know the Bible didn't say ask intelligently, but I'm sure that's what it meant. And my first teacher taught me that. He said, you got to ask intelligently. And he taught me a few things about asking intelligently, and over the years I've added a few of my own. Asking intelligently, I think, requires asking in 5 ways. There are 5 keys to asking intelligently. The formula was not bitch and you will receive. You know, it's called ask and you will receive, but you got to ask intelligently. And bitching is not asking intelligently. Neither is whining, complaining, mumbling, or grumbling. Okay, here are the 5 keys to asking intelligently. Number 1, ask specifically. Ask specifically for what you want. Don't beat around the bush. Be precise. Who, when, where, how, what do you want? Specifically, define it. Be precise. The more precise you are, the more you empower your own brain to assist you with the resources you'll need to manifest that result that you desire, as well as you'll be able to communicate to other people what your wants are, and they'll be able to help you more effectively. So number 1, you must ask specifically. Number 2, you must ask someone who can help you. When I first got taught about asking, nobody told me this one. You got to ask somebody who will help you, who has the ability to help you. A lot of people want to, but they don't have the ability. So you say, oh, I asked and I didn't receive. You didn't ask intelligent. You got to ask someone who has the ability to help you. For example, if you have terrible personal relationships, would you go to somebody else who has terrible personal relationships and say, hey, teach me what I can do to change my relationships? Doesn't make any sense, does it? And then you asked and it didn't work because you didn't ask intelligently. Would you go to somebody who makes $30,000 a year and say, loan me $3 million, will you? They're going to go, $3 million what? Right? You got to go to somebody who has the ability to help, okay? Here's the 3rd key. Create value for this person first. Don't just ask and expect them to give you something. Intelligent asking is you try and find a way to fill their needs first, or a way to connect the two. Maybe what you're going to do is just fill a need. Say, look, if you support me this way, it'll support something that you're involved in, that you feel is important. I know by what I know about you. Maybe you try and do something for them. I know one of my friends met a man. He wanted to become a millionaire, and he found a way that he could make this man $4 million. So I went to him and he said, listen, I know that I can make you $4 million in the next 2 years. And guess how many times this guy probably heard this story, right? He said, but let me tell you something. I have no strings attached. I'll work for free for 2 years. I'll support myself in other ways. But if I make you $4 million, I want you to promise me that you'll give me 1. What do you think the guy said? Of course, you're going to work for 2 years? And he said, what happens if you don't make me $4 million? You pay me nothing. He said, you got a deal. He ended up making the guy $8 million, and the man paid him 2. Yeah, because he created value first. That's called intelligent asking. Don't just say, give me this. Figure out how you can fill their needs and then ask, okay? 4th key, you must ask with congruent belief. That is, you really got to believe that they're going to say yes. If you don't believe they're going to say yes, they're not going to say yes. Because when you ask, your lack of belief will come through. You say, you wouldn't want to help me, would you? And that's not going to assist them. But if you absolutely believe they're going to say yes, and you believe so strongly, then they'll get that. And they'll begin to think, well, maybe, I guess, he must have a reason. They begin to believe that they really should do this. Your belief can affect their beliefs. Your belief can affect their behavior. So you want to get really congruent where you absolutely believe they can't say no. Now, the best way to do that is make sure you're adding so much more value than you're asking for that you know they can't afford to say anything but yes. Okay? And the last one, number 5, a lot of people do the first 4, but they don't do number 5, and that is ask until. There's a neat phrase that I think Dr. Schuller came up with. He said, God's delays are not God's denials. So if you ask, you don't receive right now, just keep asking. Asking intelligently means ask over and over again. Ask in a different way. Have sensory acuity. Don't ask the same person the same thing 8 million times. Maybe it's time you try to ask somebody else. Ask another company. Ask another organization. But ask until. See? That's what makes the biggest difference.
is how we effectively ask. Just as there are 5 keys to asking, another way of talking about goals that I think is even more effective in programming our nervous system is to call them outcomes. Because truly, how do you feel about goals? Do you always achieve your goals? Probably not. Do you always achieve an outcome? The answer there is probably yes. No matter what the situation is that you're going for, you always produce a result or an outcome. So when you use the word outcome, it creates more certainty in your nervous system and provides a greater sense of certainty that you will achieve this thing you're talking about. Now, just as there are 5 keys for asking for what you want, I consider there to be 5 elements to effective outcome development, to developing an outcome that is truly achievable. And here they are. Number 1, state your outcome in positive terms. Say what you want to happen. Too often people say what they don't want to happen. They set outcomes like, I want to stop smoking. The challenge with that, of course, is by making that your outcome, you begin to focus on what you don't want. And whatever you focus on consistently, you'll create in your experience of life. So make certain you trade that for, I am now a non-smoker, or I've traded smoking for breathing, or some other positive way of stating what you now want and what you will experience in your nervous system. 2, be as specific as possible. As I just stated, you need to know, how does your outcome look? How does it sound? How does it feel? How does it smell? You want to engage all of your senses in describing the result that you want. The more sensory rich your description of what you want, the more you'll empower your brain to create what you desire. Remember, when you imagined in your mind turning your body and going further than before, and you really associated to it, and you felt as if it was true, and you saw it as being true, it became true in your real life experience. The same thing is true in setting effective outcomes. You must daily experience the reality of your outcome already being true. You should set a certain completion date for your desired outcome. However, you also want to experience it as already being a reality so that your brain and nervous system produce whatever actions are necessary to create that result. Number 3, you've got to have an evidence procedure. You've got to know, how will you look? How will you feel? What will you see? And what will you hear in your external world after you've achieved your outcome? If you don't know how you'll know when you've achieved your outcome, then how do you know you don't already have it? Sometimes people are winning and they feel like they're losing just because they don't keep score. Many goals people have, they've already achieved, and they don't even realize it because they haven't been specific about how they'll know when they've got it. For example, many times when I talk with people and I ask them what their goals are in life, they give me very, very general examples. Like they say things like, I want more money. So I go, fine, here's $2, get out of here. You've got to be much more specific than that. Because the truth is, they probably have got more money. They got their goal. They just don't know it because they're not very specific about it, and they don't have an evidence procedure for it. Or people say to me oftentimes things like, well, Mr. Robbins, I just like to be happier, or I just like to have peace of mind. Those outcomes are not stated specifically enough. They're very general. In fact, I often say that human language has 3 forms. There's a form called fluff, there's a form called super fluff, and then there's sensory specific language. Let me explain to you the differences. If you were to look across the room at me and you saw me sitting in a chair with my right leg crossed over my left, my head tilted slightly to the right, breathing comfortably with my shoulders relaxed. If you were to look at me and describe me by saying, Tony is sitting in the chair across from me, his right leg is crossed over his left, his head is tilted slightly to the right, he's breathing in a relaxed way, his shoulders are relaxed, then you would be using sensory-based descriptions of how I am in this moment. Meaning you would not be interpreting or hallucinating about my experience or how I was feeling. You would just be describing exactly what was going on, and anyone who heard that description could get a picture of exactly how I was in that moment. If instead you looked at me and said, Tony looks happy, Tony looks sad, Tony looks excited, Tony seems joyous, all of those are what we call fluff words, meaning you are describing things based upon your interpretation, and you don't know if that's what I'm feeling just by a look. You can guess, but you don't know for sure. If you looked at me and you said, well, he's kind of like into it today, or I think he got it, or I think, he's kind of like aligned with all that's going on. Those are super generalizations, or what I call super fluff. Now, all of them have their place in human experience, but those kinds of generalizations will not help you if you set goals in that way. You've got to be very specific about what you want so that there's no possibility of misinterpretation. You've got to be so precise in not only what you want, but how you know when you've got it. For example, do you have the goal of being happy? Well, if that's your goal, I can give it to you right now. It's very simple. Try this. right now, sit the way you'd be sitting if you felt totally and completely happy. Come on, go ahead and do it. And breathe the way you'd be breathing if you felt totally happy. And say something to yourself in your own mind the way you'd be saying things to yourself if you were totally happy. See what you'd be seeing if you felt totally happy. Make your face look like what it would look like if it was totally happy. Come on, does your face look that way now? Good. Now notice how you feel. Breathe that way, speak that way, see yourself that way, sit the way you feel if you're totally happy. And notice if you've done this effectively and you're not saying something in your mind like, oh, this is ridiculous. If you're saying you're really happy, you're using that tone of voice and moving your body that way, you'll feel totally happy. So cross that one off your goals list. You've got happiness. I'm not trying to be facetious. I want to be accurate. See, most people don't have an evidence procedure for happiness. Happiness is a state. You can go into any state, any moment in time that you want to. Somebody says, well, what about peace of mind? I've been chasing that for years. That's easy. Let's try it. Sit the way you'd be sitting right now if you felt total peace of mind. Breathe the way you'd be breathing if you felt total peace of mind. See what you'd be seeing in your mind if you felt total peace of mind. Hear what you'd be hearing if you felt total peace of mind. Have your face look like what it would look like if you right now felt total peace of mind. And I think if you're doing this effectively now, you'll find you'll feel total peace of mind. So cross that one off your goals list. The truth of the matter is, if you have an evidence procedure and you know what it is that allows you to be in peace of mind, and you know how you are when you're feeling peace of mind, then you can go there right away. You don't have to beat around the bush. Clarity is power. Make sure you have an evidence procedure. Here's number 4 for creating an achievable outcome. Be in control. Make sure your outcome is something that you initiate and maintain. Make sure it's not dependent upon other people having to change themselves for you to be happy. That's not an effective outcome. Make sure your outcome reflects things that you can affect directly, and you can affect directly how you behave and how you feel, and that can impact other people, and that's fine. But make sure that in order to achieve your goal, it doesn't require you change other people, but rather that you direct your own emotion, your own communication, and your own behavior. Number 5, verify that your outcome is something that you really truly want. Make sure it's ecological and desirable. What do I mean by ecological? Well, ecology is really the study of consequences. Many times when we set out on a goal, we don't look at the consequences long-term in our lives, and we really need to do that. See, if your goal is to become a super successful person in financial terms, there's a cost for that. And it's a cost of a certain amount of time. And if you also have a goal of being the best parent in the world, there's a cost to that too. And best you look at how the goals you're setting now are going to impact you long-term to make sure they're what you really want, not just in the moment out of your excitement, but something you can commit to and you'll be happy with the result of. The best way to find out whether a goal or an outcome is ecological is to simply imagine that it's already achieved and step into the future and look around you and see how does achieving this goal or how does pursuing this goal affect your family, your friends, yourself. What kind of person are you having to become to create all that you want? Are you moving in the direction emotionally, socially, spiritually, physiologically, and financially that you really want to go? Take a look at the impact. And if it's something that you really want inside and you're committed to it and you like the effect it's having and you like the effect that it's creating, now you know you have an outcome that is truly achievable. I always ask questions in my seminars, and I want to ask you one right now. If you knew it would be impossible for you to fail, what would you attempt to do right now in your life? If you were absolutely certain of success, what activities would you pursue? What actions would you take? All of us have some idea of the things we want. Some are vague, more love, more money, more time to enjoy life. However, to empower our biocomputers to create a result, we need to become more specific than a new car, a new house, a better job. As we go through the following 12-step process for goal setting, and you begin to create your list, some of the things you'll write down will be things you've thought about for years. Some of the things will be things you've never consciously formulated before. But what you need to do is consciously decide what you want right now. Goal setting simply comes down to that, doing it. So rather than continue to talk about it, let's go through a 12-step process. I'll give you the question. With your paper and pencil, write down the answers. And by the way, get excited. There is something magical that happens when you begin to change your internal idea of what you want and externalize it with pencil and paper. So let's begin the 12 steps. Step 1. Start by making an inventory of your dreams, the things you want to have, be, do, and share. I want you right now to create the people, the feelings, the places you want to be a part of your life. Sit down right now, grab your paper and pen, and begin writing. The key is to commit your pen moving nonstop for no less than 10 to 15 minutes. Don't try to define how you're going to get this outcome that you want right now, and don't put any limits on it. Act as if whatever you're writing down you know you can achieve. It's a Christmas list, if you will. Just write it all down. There are no limits. Abbreviate whenever possible so you can immediately get on to the next goal. Keep your pen moving for the entire time. Take as long as you need to put together this broad sampling of outcomes that you desire for your life. You can do it in several ways. You can just make one big list, or you can take several pieces of paper and put on one emotional goals, another one spiritual goals, another one physiological goals, another one financial goals, family goals, material goals. And you might take those 5 or 6 pages and begin to take a time for each of the pages. Remember, everything is within your grasp. Knowing your outcome is the first key to reaching it. By the way, goal setting is like play. Let your mind roam free, and whatever limitations you've had in the past, remember you've created them, and they only exist in your mind. So right now, we're going to change your representation of what your future is and what you're capable of. The list you're going to make is for all the things that you'd ever want to achieve for the next 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years of your life. Put no limits on this list. Just create the giant grab bag of outcomes you desire for your life. Where would you like to go? What would you like to do? What would you like to create? Who would you like to visit with? What kind of person would you like to become? How much money would you like to have? Would you like to have a yacht? Would you like to live certain places? What would you like your children to be like? Make the list covering every aspect of life. Stop the tape now and begin writing your list. Welcome back. So did you develop a huge list? Did you cover all the areas of your life? Emotional, social, spiritual, physiological, financial? I hope you just didn't keep listening to this tape, because that won't do you any good at all. Stopping and taking the time was what it finally comes down to. Some people say, but I don't know what I want. I don't have any ideas. You'd be surprised when you start making a list. One of the easiest ways to get some ideas is get around where people are doing very, very well and let something hit you. That's part of how passion is created in life. That's part of how you set new goals, by trying new things. But right now, you should have a substantial list to start with, so let's go on to the next step. Let's do a second exercise. Go over the list you've made and estimate when you expect to reach these outcomes. Over 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. Just write the number next to the goal. Don't take a lot of time again. Do it very, very quickly. It's helpful to see what sort of time frame you're operating in. After you've made your list, make a note of how your list came out. Some people find that their list may be dominated by things that they want today. Others find that their greatest dreams are far in the future, in some imagined period of total achievement and fulfillment. If all your goals are short-term, you need to start taking a longer view of your potential possibility. If all your goals are long-term, you need to first develop some steps that can lead you in the direction you expect to go. Remember, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's important to be aware of both the first steps and the final ones. Stop the tape and figure out your timelines now. What did you discover? Are most of your goals short-term or long-term, or is there a balance? Hopefully this will give you an idea of where you need to focus in your goal-setting development. Let's move on to step 3. Now I want you to try something else. I want you to pick out the 5 most important goals for you for this year. Pick the things that you're most committed to, the things you're most excited about, the things that would give you the most satisfaction. Write them down right now. We're looking for the things that can generate the passion, the things that can drive you to use all the skills you have as a human being. And once you've done that, I want you to also to write at least a paragraph about why you will absolutely achieve these 5 outcomes. I want you to sell yourself on the reasons of why it's important that you do. One of my first teachers, Jim Rohn, taught me that if you can find enough reasons to do something, you can get yourself to do anything. Our purpose in doing something is a much stronger motivator than the object that we're pursuing. So get yourself some reasons. Reasons are the difference between being interested versus being committed to accomplishing something. There are many things in life we say we want, but we're only really interested in them for a short time. In order for outcomes to be achieved, we must be totally committed to do whatever it takes to achieve them. If, for example, you just say you want to be rich, well, that's a goal, but it doesn't tell your brain very much. If you understand why you want to be rich, what being wealthy would mean to you, you'll be much more motivated to get there. Why to do something is much more important than how to do it. If you get a big enough why, you can always figure out how to do something. If you have enough reasons, you can virtually do anything in this world. So turn the tape off now, select your 5 outcomes, and create a paragraph in each one as to why you absolutely will do whatever it takes to achieve them this year. Welcome back again. Do you have the 5 goals that you can be passionate about? Are you clear about your reasons? Now you have a direction that you can move in. So let's move to step 4. Now that you have a list of your key goals, review them against the 5 rules for formulating outcomes. Are your goals stated in the positive? Are they sensory specific? Do they have a clear evidence procedure? Describe what you will experience when you achieve them in even clearer sensory terms. What will you see, hear, feel, and smell? Also note if the goals are maintainable by you. Are you in control? Are they ecological and desirable for you and others? If they violate any of these conditions, change them so they fit. And then let's move on to step 5. Next, make a list of the most important resources you already have at your disposal that could help you to achieve these goals. When you begin a construction project, you need to know which tools you have. To construct an empowering vision of your future, you need to do the same thing. So make a list of what you already have going for you: character traits, friends, financial resources, education, time, energy, or whatever. Come up with an inventory of strengths, skills, resources, and tools. Turn the tape off now and take this seriously. Create a resource list that you can pull from in the future and that you're consciously aware of now. How did your resource list come out? Did you have more resources than you realized? Most of us do. Let's move on to step 6. Let's focus in on some times when you use some of these resources most skillfully. I'd like you to take a moment now and come up with 3 to 5 times in your life when you were totally successful at doing something. Think of the times in business or sports or financial matters, or maybe even relationships, when you did something particularly well. And it can be anything from a killing in the stock market to a wonderful day with your kids. And I want you to write these 3 to 5 experiences down and describe what you did that made you succeed. What were the qualities or resources that you made effective use of in order to make the situation successful? Turn off the tape and do this now. Few of us take the time to analyze their successes. Most people are busy reviewing their past failures over and over again. You might even want to take a moment at some point to take these experiences of the past that you felt so good about and enhance them by making them bigger, brighter, more focused, bringing them closer to you. Now, after we've done all that, let's take a moment and have you describe the kind of person that you would have to become to attain all of your outcomes. Will it take a great deal of discipline, a great deal of education? Would you have to manage your time well? If, for example, you want to be a civic leader who really makes a difference, describe what kind of person gets elected and really has the ability to affect large numbers of people. You know, we hear a lot about success, but we don't hear as much about the components of success, the attitudes, the beliefs, and behaviors that go into producing it. If you don't have a good grasp of the components, you may find it difficult to put together the whole. So stop now and write a couple of paragraphs or a page about all the character traits, skills, attitudes, beliefs, and disciplines you'd need to have to be the kind of person who could achieve all that you desire. Take the time and do it now. As you review your description of this person, is this the kind of person you really want to become? If it is, you have goals that will truly cause you to be happy long term. Let's do step number 8. Next, in a few paragraphs, I want you to write down what prevents you from having the things you desire right now. One way to overcome limitations you've created in the past is to know exactly what they are. Dissect your personality to see what's been holding you back from achieving what you wanted in the past. Have you failed to plan? Did you plan but fail to act? Did you try to do too many things at one time? In the past, have you imagined the worst possible scenario and then allowed that internal representation to stop you from taking action? Stop the tape, take a moment now, and describe the things that have stopped you in the past so you can change them in the present and in the future. We can know what we want, why we want it, and who will help us, and a lot of other things, but the critical ingredient that in the end determines whether we succeed in achieving our outcomes is our actions. To guide our actions, we must create a step-by-step plan. When you build a house, you don't just go out and get a pile of wood, some nails, a hammer, and a saw, and then start to go to work. Would you just start sawing and hammering and see what came out? Would that lead to success? It's highly unlikely. To build a house, you need a blueprint. You need a plan. You need a sequence and a structure so your actions complement and reinforce one another. Otherwise, you'll just have a wild assemblage of boards. It's the same with life. So right now, you need to put together your own blueprint for success. What are the necessary actions that you must take consistently to produce the result you desire? If you're not sure, think of someone you can model, someone who's already accomplished what you desire. How do you establish a plan? Well, first you start with your ultimate outcome, and then you work backwards step by step. If one of your major outcomes is to become financially independent, then the step before that might be to become president of your company. The step before that might become vice president or another important officer. Another step might be to find a smart investment counselor and or a tax lawyer. It's critical that you continue to work backwards from your goals until you find something that you can do today to support the achievement of that goal. Maybe today you can go and open a savings account, or you can get a book that teaches you some of the financial strategies of successful people in our culture. If you want to be a professional dancer, what do you have to do to reach that outcome? What are the major steps, and what are some of the things you can do today, tomorrow, this week, this month, this year to produce that result? If you want to be the greatest composer in the world, what are the steps along the way? By working backwards, step by step, for your outcomes and everything from business to your personal life, you can map out a precise path to follow from your ultimate goals down to what you can do today. Use the information you got in this last exercise about what has stopped you in the past to guide the design of your plan. If you're not sure what your plan should be, just ask yourself, what prevents you from having what you want? The answer to that question will probably be something you can work on immediately to change. The solving of that problem becomes a sub-goal or a stepping stone to the achievement of your better goals. So step 9 is this. Take the time now to take each of your goals and create your first draft of a step-by-step plan on how to achieve it. Remember to start with a goal and ask yourself, what would I have to do first to accomplish this? Or what prevents me from having this now, and what can I do to change this? Make sure your plans include something you can do today. Go ahead and do this now. Welcome back. So far, we've completed the first part of that ultimate success formula we talked about earlier. You absolutely know your outcomes. You've defined your outcomes over both the short and long term, and you define which aspects of your personality help you and which have hindered you from getting what you wanted in the past. Now I want you to start developing a strategy for how to get there. What's the surest way to achieve excellence? It's, of course, to model someone who's already done what you want to do. So step 10 is simple. Come up with some models. They can be people from your life, or they can be famous people who've achieved great success. Right now, write down the names of 3 to 5 people who've achieved what you want to achieve, and specify in a few words the qualities and behaviors that make them successful. After you've done this, close your eyes and imagine for a moment that each of these people is going to give you some advice about how to best go about accomplishing your goals. Write down one main idea that each of these people would give you if he or she was speaking to you personally. Maybe it's about how to avoid a roadblock or break through a limitation or what to pay attention to. Just imagine that they're talking to you and jot down under each of their names the first idea that comes to you about what you think each one of them would say to you. Even though you may not know them personally, this process can become an excellent advisor's committee for your future. You know, Adnan Khashoggi modeled Rockefeller. He wanted to be a wealthy, successful businessman, so he modeled someone who had done what he wanted to do. Steven Spielberg modeled people at Universal Studios even before he was hired. Virtually everyone who's been a great success has had a model or a mentor or a teacher who guided him or her in the right direction. Now you have a clear internal representation of where you want to go. You can save time and energy and avoid traveling down wrong paths by following the examples of people who've succeeded already. You can learn by their experience. If you're having challenges coming up with a list, just ask yourself, who are the people in your own life who serve as models? There are resources in your friends, your family, national leaders, celebrities. If you don't know any good models, you should make a point of going out and finding some now. Next, get a clear idea of your future. Get a clear idea of some of the goals that you want to accomplish and know that you'll accomplish. And use some of the methods that you've already learned. Right now, enlarge the pictures, make it brighter, make it more focused, step into it and more fully associate. If you'll do this on a regular, consistent basis, you will embed into your nervous system your desire. You will program what you want, and your biocomputer, your brain, will do whatever it takes to produce that result. Let's move on to the last two processes. Step number 11. It's great to have all kinds of different goals, but what's even nicer is to find a way to put them all together so they dovetail or support each other. The best way to do this is to create your ideal day. Let's do that now. What people would be involved? What would you do? How would it begin? Where would you go? Where would you be? Do it from the time you get up to the time you go to sleep at night. What kind of environment would you be in? How would you feel when you climbed into bed at the end of a perfect day? Use your pen and paper and describe it in detail. Remember, all the results, actions, and realities we experience start from creations in our minds. So create your day the way you desire it most. Stop the tape, have fun, and do this now. How was your day? Did you associate to it fully? Can you imagine living a day like that and what it would be like? Great. Let's do the final step, step 12. Sometimes we forget that dreams begin at home. We forget that the first step towards success is providing ourselves with an atmosphere that nurtures our creativity and really helps us to be everything we can be. So finally, I want you to design your perfect environment. I want you to accentuate your sense of place. I want you to let your mind go. There are no limitations. Whatever you want, you should put it down in writing. Remember to think like a king. Design an environment that would bring out the best of you as a person. Where would you be? In the woods? By the ocean? In an office? What tools would you have? An art pad, paints, music, a computer, a telephone, a stereo? What support people would you have around you to make sure you achieved and created all that you desired? If you don't have a clear representation of what your ideal day would be, what are your chances of creating it? If you don't know what your ideal environment would be, how would you create that? All the results in the world start with changes of the world inside of you. Remember, the brain needs clear, direct signals of what it wants to achieve. Your mind has the power to give you everything you want, but can only do that if it gets clear, bright, intense, focused signals. Henry Ford once said, "Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is the probable reason why so few people engage in it." My compliments to you for doing the exercises in this portion of the tape. These exercises could be one of the most important steps you've taken toward producing the unmistakable brain signals that produce the results you want. You can't reach your outcomes if you don't know what it is. If you get anything at all from this portion of the tape, it should be this: results are inevitable. If you don't provide your mind with the programming of the results you desire, someone else will provide the programming for you. If you don't have your own plan for your life, someone else is going to make you fit into their plan. If all you did was listen to this tape, you've wasted your time. It's imperative that you take the time to do each of these exercises. They may not be easy at first, but believe me, they're worth it. And as you begin to do them, they become more and more fun. One of the reasons most people don't do well in life is because success is usually disguised behind hard work. And goal setting or outcome development is hard work. It's easy for people to put things like this off and get trapped into making a living instead of designing their lives. Exert your personal power now and take the time to discipline yourself to fully complete these exercises if you haven't already. It's been said that there are only two pains in life. One is the pain of discipline, the other the pain of regret. And that discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. There's a great deal of excitement to be gained by applying these 12 principles. Do this for yourself and do it again later on in a few months and see if you have the same goals, the same desires, because goals do change and you should have the flexibility to give yourself new choices. Before we go, we should do one final thing, and that is make a list of the activities and the people of your life that you're most grateful for, the resources you already have available to you. I call this a gratitude diary. Some people get so fixated on what they want, they fail to appreciate or use what they already have. The first step toward a goal is seeing what you have, give thanks for it, and applying it to your future achievements. Remember, we all have ways to make our lives better at any moment. Achieving your wildest dreams should begin today with the everyday steps that can put you on the right path. Shakespeare once wrote, "Action is eloquence." Begin today with eloquent actions that will lead you to even more eloquent outcomes. Make your dreams a reality. Beliefs, the foundation for creating change in human state and human behavior. In his wonderful book, Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins tells an instructive story about Pablo Casals, one of the great musicians of the 20th century. It's a story of belief and renewal, and we can all learn from it. Cousins says that it was almost painful to watch the old man as he began his day. His frailty and arthritis were so debilitating that he needed help him in dressing. His emphysema was evident in his labored breathing. He walked with a shuffle, stooped over, his head pitched forward, his hands were swollen, his fingers clenched. He looked like a very old, very tired man. Even before eating, he made his way to the piano, though, one of the several instruments on which Casals had become proficient. With great difficulty, he arranged himself on the piano bench. It seemed a terrible effort for him to bring his clenched, swollen fingers to the keyboard. And then something quite miraculous happened. Casals suddenly and completely transformed himself before Cousins' eyes. He went into a resourceful state, and as he did, his physiology changed to such a degree that he began to move and play and produce, both in his body and on the piano, results that should have been possible only for a healthy, strong, flexible pianist. As Cousins put it, quote, "The fingers slowly unlocked and reached toward the keys like the buds of a plant toward the sunlight. His back straightened. He seemed to breathe more freely," unquote. The very thought of playing the piano totally changed his state and thus the effectiveness of his body. Casals began playing some of Bach's work with great sensitivity and control. He then launched into a Brahms concerto, and his fingers seemed to race above the keyboard. Cousins wrote, "His entire body seemed fused with the music. It was no longer stiff and shrunken, but supple and graceful and completely freed of its arthritic coils. By the time he walked away from the piano, he seemed entirely different from the person who'd sat down to play. He stood straighter and taller. He walked without the trace of a shuffle. He immediately walked to breakfast, ate heartily, and then went out for a stroll along the beach." We usually think of beliefs in terms of creeds or doctrines, and that's what many beliefs are. But in the most basic sense, a belief is any guiding principle, dictum, faith, or passion that can provide meaning and direction in life. Unlimited stimuli are available to us. Beliefs are the prearranged, organized filters to our perceptions of the world. Beliefs are like commanders of the brain. When we congruently believe something is true, it is like delivering a command to our brain as to how to represent what is occurring. Casals believed in music and in art. That's what had given beauty and order and nobility to his life, and that's what would still provide daily miracles for him. Because he believed in the transcendent power of his art, he was empowered in a way that almost defies understanding. His beliefs transformed him daily from a tired old man to a vital genius. In the most profound sense, they kept him alive. John Stuart Mill once wrote, "One person with a belief is equal to a force of 99 who have only interests." That's precisely why beliefs open the door to excellence. Beliefs deliver a direct command to your nervous system. When you believe something is true, you literally go into the state of it being true. Handled effectively, beliefs can be the most powerful forces for creating good in our lives. On the other hand, beliefs that limit your actions and thoughts can be as devastating as resourceful beliefs can be empowering. Religions throughout history have empowered millions of people and given them strength to do things they thought they could not. Beliefs help us to tap the richest resources deep within us, creating and directing these resources in the support of our desired outcomes. In fact, there is no more powerful directing force in human behavior than belief. In essence, human history is really the history of human belief. The people who've changed history, whether it be Christ, Muhammad, Copernicus, Columbus, Edison, or Einstein, they've all been people who've changed our beliefs. To change our behaviors, we've got to start with changing our beliefs. If we want to model excellence, we need to learn to model the beliefs of those who have achieved excellence. The more we learn about human behavior, the more we learn about the extraordinary power that beliefs have over our lives. In many ways, that power defies the logical models most of us have. But it's clear that even at the level of physiology, beliefs, which are nothing but congruent internal representations, control our reality. A remarkable study was done on schizophrenia not long ago. One case involved a woman with a split personality. Normally her blood sugar levels were completely normal, but when she believed she was a diabetic, her whole physiology changed to become that of a diabetic. Her belief had become her reality. In a similar vein, there have been numerous studies in which a person in a hypnotic trance is touched with a piece of ice and told that it's actually a piece of hot metal. Invariably, a blister will develop at the point of contact. What counted was not reality but belief, the direct, unquestioned communication to the nervous system. The brain simply does what it's told. Most of us are aware of the placebo effect. People who are told a drug will have a certain effect will many times experience that effect, even when an empty pill with no active properties is given. Norman Cousins, who learned firsthand the power of belief in eliminating his own illness, concludes, quote, "Drugs are not always necessary. Belief in recovery always is," unquote. One remarkable placebo study concerned a group of patients with bleeding ulcers. They were divided into two groups. People in the first group were told that they were being given a new drug that would absolutely produce relief. Those in the second were told they were being given an experimental drug, but that very little was known about its effect. 70% of those in the first group experienced significant relief from their ulcers. Only 25% of the second group had a similar result. In both cases, patients received a drug with no medicinal properties at all. The only difference was the belief system they adopted. Even more remarkable are the numerous studies of people who, given drugs known to have harmful effects, have experienced no ill effects at all when they were told that they would experience a positive outcome. Studies conducted by Dr. Andrew Weil, an MD and graduate of Harvard University, have shown that the experiences of drug users correspond almost exactly to their expectations. He found he could lead a person giving a dose of amphetamines to feel sedated or a person given a barbiturate to feel stimulated. The magic of drugs resides within the mind of the user, not in the drugs, Weil concluded. In all these instances, the one constant that most powerfully affected the results was belief, the consistent, congruent message delivered to the brain and nervous system. For all its power, there is no abstruse magic involved in the process. Belief is nothing but a state, an internal representation that governs behavior. It's a feeling of certainty about something. It can be an empowering belief in possibility, a belief that we will succeed in something or achieve something, or it can be a disempowering belief, a belief that we can't succeed, that our limitations are clear, intractable, and overwhelming. If you believe in success, you'll be empowered to achieve it. If you believe in failure, those messages will tend to lead you to experience that as well. Remember, whether you say you can do something or whether you say you can't, you're right. Both kinds of beliefs have great power. The question is, what kinds of beliefs are best to have, and how do we develop them? I believe the birth of excellence really begins with our awareness that our beliefs are a choice. We usually don't think of them that way, but they are. They're just programmed feelings about what is true and not in the world. and we can change them. Where do we get our beliefs? Well, there are basically 5 sources. Our environment, that is what we grow up in, the environment we live in, gives us models of success or failure, about what is right and wrong, about what is possible and impossible. One of the most difficult things about slum life is that children grow up with few models, if any, that would lead them to believe that they could produce greater results in their life. We see the same challenge in families on the welfare system, where we now have 3rd generations that are still on welfare. They have no other model of possibility. They believe that is how life is. They believe they have no other choice, and so they experience their life as having limited choice. Another source of beliefs comes from events that we've experienced in our life. Various experiences that we have cause us to believe certain things. I know when I was growing up, I was very fortunate to have experiences where I went out and tried things. I tried to interview successful business people, successful sports writers and sportscasters and athletes, and I succeeded in several cases. This caused me to believe that individuals of power, individuals of influence, were accessible, that I too could be like them, that I could learn to produce new results. That belief caused me to continue to take actions later in my future. A third way that beliefs are fostered is through knowledge. What you know and what you don't know both affect your beliefs. If you know the earth is flat, you're going to behave differently than if you know the earth is round. Knowledge makes a big difference. So we want to continually educate ourselves so we develop the kinds of beliefs that empower us versus limit us. A fourth way in which beliefs are formulated is by the results we've achieved in the past. If you've attempted to do something in the past and you've succeeded, you tend to believe that you can do it again. If, on the other hand, you have never succeeded and attempted something many times, it becomes difficult to believe that you could succeed now. So past results definitely have an impact in people's belief structures. Finally, the most important way in which we can establish new beliefs is by creating results in advance. That is, by setting clear enough goals that we step into and begin to experience as true, we can begin to develop a new set of beliefs about what is really possible in our lives, and that can begin to drive us forward. Take out a piece of paper if you would. Okay, now make a list of at least 5 positive beliefs that can now serve to support you in achieving your goals. If you were going to create 5 beliefs for yourself that would empower you to be, do, and share more, what would they be? Write them down now, stop the tape, and then come back. So now you have 5 beliefs that you'd like to adopt. Let me help you by adding more. In my modeling of human excellence, I have found that people who succeed consistently seem to share certain belief systems, and I'd like to share a few of them with you. These are not the only key beliefs, obviously, but they're a good start to add to your list. Here's the first one. People who succeed on a large scale seem to believe, belief number 1, that everything happens for a reason and a purpose, and that it serves them. You remember the story of W. Mitchell? What was the central belief that helped him to overcome adversity? He decided to take what happened to him and make it work for him in whatever way he could. In the same way, all successful people I've studied have an uncanny ability to focus on what is possible in a situation, on what positive results can come from whatever's happened to them. No matter how much negative feedback they get from the environment, they think in terms of possibilities. They think that everything happens for a reason and it serves them. And because they believe this, they find benefits out of almost any adversity. Let's face it, in life, many things will happen to us that we'll have no explanation for. We have no idea of why it's happened and what it's occurred. Sometimes we do everything right and it still turns up wrong, and that's the truth. That's how life is. But if we can offer ourselves and operate from the belief that everything in life happens for a reason and a purpose and it serves us, then by having that belief alone, we'll find a benefit. We'll find a way to make that useful. It allows us to continue to take action instead of being immobilized by the pain or challenges that have beset us. A second key belief that I've modeled from successful individuals is that they believe that there is no such thing as failure, that there are only results. This is almost a corollary belief to number 1. Most people in our culture have been programmed to fear this thing called failure. Yet all of us can think of times when we wanted one thing and we got another. We've all flunked a test, suffered through those frustrating romances that didn't work out, or put together a business plan only to see everything go awry. You'll notice in this tape program that I use the word outcome and the word results quite a bit, because that's exactly what successful people see. They don't see failure. They don't even believe in it. It doesn't compute. People always succeed in getting some sort of result. The super successes of our culture aren't people who don't fail, but simply people who know that if they try something and if it doesn't work, they can just try something else. They've had a learning experience. They use what they've learned and simply try something else again. They take some new actions and produce some new results. Think about it. What's the one asset, the one benefit you have today over yesterday? The answer, of course, is experience. People who fear failure make internal representations of what might not work in advance. And this is what keeps them from taking the very action that could ensure the accomplishment of their desires. Are you afraid of failure? Well, how do you feel about learning? You can learn from every human experience and thereby always succeed in anything you do. Let me give you an example of someone's life history. This is a man who failed in business at the age of 31. He was defeated in his legislative race at the age of 32. He failed again in business at the age of 34. He overcame the death of his sweetheart at the age of 35. He had a nervous breakdown at the age of 36. He lost an election at the age of 38. He lost a congressional race at the age of 43. He lost another congressional race at the age of 46. He lost another congressional race at the age of 48. He lost a senatorial race at the age of 55. He failed in his efforts to become vice president of the United States at age 56. He lost another senatorial race at the age of 58, and he was elected President of the United States at age 60. The man whose life's history I've shared with you is a man named Abraham Lincoln. Anytime you start thinking success is easy or that there are no challenges in life, take another look around at the people who've succeeded on a large scale. Could Abraham Lincoln have become President of the United States if he'd seen his election losses as failures? It's not likely. There's a famous story about Thomas Edison. After he tried 9,999 times to perfect the light bulb and hadn't succeeded, someone asked him, "Are you going to have 10,000 failures?" He answered, "I didn't fail. I just discovered another way not to invent the electric light bulb." What he had discovered was another set of actions that produced another set of results.
There are only results. These people who are truly the super achievers, those people that people throughout this culture like to talk about, read about, write about, what really set them apart was they got themselves to take action, and the reason they got themselves to take action is they didn't believe there was such a thing as failure. No matter what happened, they just looked at it as a result. They looked at it as an outcome. And if it was not the result that they intended, they simply learned from what occurred and changed their approach and took more action. And if that didn't work, what do they do? Changed again. And if that didn't work, what do they do? Changed again. Now, the trap most of us fall into is we intend a certain kind of result to occur. We don't get the result, and we call it what? Failure. And the reality is there are no failures because we always succeed in producing a result, don't we? Remember last night I talked to you about, this woman comes and says, I weigh 285 pounds, and she's all upset, right? I said, look, get excited. You produced a massive result. Called excess weight on a large scale. That took effort, didn't it? You have to work at that. She had to eat a certain way, think a certain way. She had to produce specific actions to get that result. So instead of going, oh, it's a failure and feeling bad, feel excited about the fact that few people have been able to produce that result. Now, if you say, but I don't like the result, say, well, that's fine. At least now you know how to produce that. If you know anybody who ever wants to beef up, you can explain how. Now, if you don't like the result, then all you have to do is find someone who is thin and find out what they are doing and do the same things. Doesn't that make sense? Find out what they're doing in their mind, how they look at food, how they think about food, how they move their body, how they exercise, what they eat, how much they eat, and see if you can't model that. And if you sow similar seeds, you'll produce similar results. Then you'll produce a result called being thin. But here's the key. As long as this woman holds all this pain and anguish and hurt and feelings of failure about being overweight, do you think that's going to assist her in her ability to lose weight? Yes or no? There's no way. It literally becomes an emotional blockage. It changes her self-image into failure and literally becomes this immobilizing factor that keeps her from being thin. See? So you've got to let go of that. I worked with an Olympic athlete several years ago who was a high jumper. He was one of the top high jumpers in the world about 4 or 5 years ago. And all of a sudden, for 2 years, he couldn't jump his hat size. And so he asked me if I'd come out and work out with him and see what it was and see if I could assist him. I said, no problem. Well, all I had to do was watch him jump one time to see what the problem was. Here he goes. He gets himself lined up. Sure enough, he goes for the jump, and just as he takes off, he has a poor takeoff, and he hits the bar. So when he gets off on the other side, he jumps up and he starts screaming at himself inside. Now, not out loud screaming, but you know what I'm talking about by screaming? It's like so angry with himself, and he's cursing, going, God, and he's saying all these filthy words to himself. And I pulled him over and I said, look, if you want me to work with you, I'll never see that again. I said, that's the reason why you're not producing the result you want. Because every time you produce a result, when it's not the one you intended, instead of going, wow, that's great, I produced a result, I learned something. I learned that if I take off here, I'll hit this bar here. Instead of doing that, what you're doing is you're programming yourself with failure. You're carrying around this negative emotional baggage. And when you go to jump the next time, that emotional baggage is there. It's affecting your self-image, and it's affecting the way you use your nervous system. I said, I want to see you every single time when you get off there, whether you hit the bar or whether you clear it, you jump up and celebrate and go, here's what I learned. And you remember what you've learned, and you run back like you just did the best jump of your life. And then when you go to run, your nervous system will be in a place where it'll allow you to tap your peak levels of performance. As long as you hold things as failure, that prevents you from tapping peak levels of performance. And you want to be a peak performer, whether you be a father, a mother, a teacher, a student, a businessman, it doesn't matter. Peak performance is what we all are striving for, because that's where the joy is, when we're tapping more of who we are. And the only way that'll happen is you realize there are no failures, there are only outcomes. Just write down, I always succeed in producing a result. If it's not the one I intend, then I just learn from that and I change my approach and I'll produce a new result. And I'll keep changing until I produce the result that I intend. That's all it takes to succeed.
Just remember, belief in failure is a way of poisoning the mind. When we store negative emotions about failure, we affect our physiology, our thinking processes, and our state. One of the greatest limitations for most people is their fear of failure. And I think Dr. Robert Schuller, who teaches the concept of possibility thinking, asked the best question to overcome that fear. He says, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? Think about it. How would you answer that? If you really believed you couldn't fail, you might take a whole new set of actions and produce a powerful new set of results for your life. Wouldn't you be better off trying them? Isn't that the only way to grow? So I suggest you start realizing right now that there is no such thing as failure, that there are only results. You always produce a result. If it's not the one you desire, you can just change your actions and you'll produce new results. Cross out the word failure from your personal dictionary and write in the word outcome. And commit yourself to learning from every human experience. Belief number 3 is whatever happens, take responsibility. This is another attribute that great leaders and achievers have in common.
Achievers, no matter where we found them in the culture, no matter what they did, no matter what their background was, true leaders seem to have this as a common belief, that no matter what happened in their life, they were the source. At some level, they generated it. If not by their physical actions, by their mental actions. They seem to believe that they created whatever happened in their life. That was the bottom line. If somebody cut them off on the road even, on some level, they helped to contribute to that because they didn't pay attention close enough or they didn't anticipate. That's how leaders are. They take full responsibility. Now, this is not how most people in the culture respond, obviously. Large amounts of people in the culture, especially those who are failing on a consistent basis, come from the antithesis of this belief. And that is that they're a victim, that things happen to them, that things are beyond their control. So one of the first perceptual shifts that we like to share with people in terms of their belief structures is to operate from the belief system that you create your world. I mean, if you don't believe you create your world, then look at what the other opportunity is. Look at what you're going to have to believe then, that you are a puppet, that things happen to you, that you're a victim. I'd rather believe that I'm in charge and that I can have an effect. See, even if it's not true, at least if I believe that, I'll take action that can make a difference. See, if I believe I create my world and I don't like the way things are, then I can what? Change it. If I believe I'm a victim, then hey, there's nothing I can do. So I want to challenge you to adopt this belief system for your life. Adopt the belief that no matter what happens here, whether you're happy, sad, excited, energized, bored, interested, whatever it is, you create it. See, who generates whether you're bored or not? Is it a speaker? No, I'm sorry, it's not a speaker, right? What it is you. No matter how boring a person is, you can get excited about that. You can get fascinated by that. You can go, God, isn't it fascinating how he bores so many people? How does he do that? That's amazing. I mean, I've never seen somebody who could bore so many people so quickly. Right? See, so you're still in charge. You're still responsible for your state. You're still responsible for the results that are generated. And the truth is, leaders operate from this frame. I remember hearing Dan Rather speak about John F. Kennedy years and years ago. And Rather was saying that he remembered the day that Kennedy became a true leader. He said it was right after the Bay of Pigs. Remember that? He said when he got up in front of the American people after the Bay of Pigs, and instead of saying, oh, the CIA did this, or we tried this or that, he just got up and he said, listen, it was an atrocity. It shouldn't have happened this way. I take full what? Responsibility. Yeah, he said that's the day he became a true leader. See, that's the next step. That's a major step in the level of increasing maturity that human beings take on. The key is to realize that no matter what happens in our life, we are in charge. Although some things may seem like they're happening to us, we can help to create new results. We can handle anything that happens. But we first need to adopt the philosophy or the belief that we control and direct our lives. Belief number 4, people are your greatest resource. Individuals of excellence, that is, people who produce outstanding results, almost universally have a tremendous sense of respect and appreciation for people. They have a sense of team, a sense of common purpose and unity. If there's any insight at the heart of this new generation of business books like Innovation and Entrepreneurship or In Search of Excellence or The 1-Minute Manager, is that there's no long-lasting success without rapport amongst people. The way to succeed is to form a successful team that's working together. We've all seen reports on the Japanese factories where workers and management eat in the same cafeteria and where both have input into evaluating performance. Their success reflects the wonders that can be achieved when we respect people rather than trying to manipulate them. When Thomas Peters and Robert Waterman Jr. wrote the book In Search of Excellence, they basically did modeling. They distilled the factors that made companies great. And one of the key things that they found was a passionate attention to people. There was hardly a more pervasive theme in excellent companies than respect for the individual. The companies that succeeded were the ones that treated people with respect and dignity. These companies viewed their employees as partners, not as tools. They noted that in one study, 18 of 20 Hewlett-Packard executives that they interviewed said the company's success depended on Hewlett-Packard's people-oriented philosophy. Hewlett-Packard isn't a retailer dealing with the public or a service company dependent upon goodwill. It's dealing at the most complex frontiers of modern technology. But even there, it's clear that dealing effectively with people is seen as the most important challenge that corporations face. Like many of the beliefs we've talked about here, this one is easier to glibly mouth than to actually adopt. It's easy to pay lip service to the idea of treating people, whether they be in your family or your business, with the kind of respect that they deserve. It's not always easy to do it. So as you move through your life, keep in your mind the constant desire to treat people with love and respect and appreciation, and have the acuity to note, do people feel respected by you? And if they don't, change your behaviors until they do. Belief number 5, work is play. Do you know any person who's achieved massive success by doing what he hates? I sure don't. One of the keys to success is making a successful marriage between what you do and what you love. Picasso once said, "When I work, I relax. Doing nothing or entertaining visitors makes me tired." Maybe we can't paint as well as Picasso, but we can do our best to find work that invigorates and excites us. And we can bring to whatever we do at work many of the aspects of what we do at play. Mark Twain said, "The secret of success is making your vocation your vacation." That's what successful people seem to do. We hear a lot about workaholics these days. And there are some people whose work has become something of an unhealthy obsession. They don't seem to get any pleasure out of their work, but they reach the point where they can't do anything else. Researchers are finding surprising things about some workaholics. There are some people who seem maniacally focused on work because they love it. It challenges them. It excites them. It makes their life richer. These people tend to look at work the way most of us look at play. They see it as a way to stretch themselves, to learn new things, to explore new avenues. By adopting this kind of belief, you change the quality of your life, since much of your life will be spent working. I'm not suggesting that you should choose to orient your world around your work, but I am suggesting that you'll enrich your world and enrich your work if you bring to it the same curiosity and vitality that you bring to your play. Finally, belief number 6. There is no abiding success without commitment. Individuals who succeed have a belief in the power of commitment. If there's a single belief that seems almost inseparable from success, it's that there's no great success without great commitment. If you look at successful people in any field, you'll find that they're not necessarily the best and the brightest, the fastest, or the strongest. You'll find they're the ones with the most commitment. The great Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova once said, quote, "To follow without halt one aim, there is the secret of success," unquote. It's just another way of stating our ultimate success formula. Know your outcome.
model what works, take action, develop sensory acuity to know what you're getting, and keep refining it until you get what you want. You know, we see this in any field. People with commitment overpowering those who seem to have greater natural ability. I mean, what makes Larry Bird one of the best players in basketball? A lot of people are still wondering. He's slow, he can't jump. In a world full of graceful gazelles, he sometimes looks like he's playing in slow motion. But when you come right down to it, Larry Bird succeeds because he has a massive commitment to success. He practices harder. He has more mental toughness. He gets more out of his skills than almost anyone else. Pete Rose has made his way into the record books the same way, by consistently using his commitment to excellence as a force driving him to get everything he's got out of everything he does. Tom Watson, the great golfer, was nothing special at Stanford University, where he went to school. He was just another kid on the team. But his coach still marvels about Watson, saying, "I never saw anyone practice more." The difference in pure physical skills between athletes seldom tells you anything. It's the quality of commitment that separates the good from the great. Are there other beliefs that foster excellence? Sure there are. And when you think of them, so much the better. Adopt them in your own life. Remember, success leaves clues. Study those who succeed. Find out about their key beliefs that they hold that enhance their ability to take effective action and apply them in your own life. We've talked so far about passion and about beliefs, but there's another key element we need to talk about next, and that is organizing a strategy for success.